Did you ever stop and wonder how the everyday things we trusted in the 1980s ended up being completely illegal today? These items filled homes, schools, and neighborhoods without a single warning label, and no one imagined they could quietly carry dangers we never saw coming. Lead tinsel icicle strands were the most dazzling addition to any Christmas tree in the 1980s, catching every flicker of light and sending it shimmering across the living room in waves of silver glory. Families draped them over branches with abandon, creating that cascading waterfall effect that made even modest trees look like holiday catalog photos. Kids loved running their fingers through the cool metallic strands, watching them sway as tree lights blinked behind them. Nobody questioned what made them so beautifully heavy, so smooth compared to cheaper plastic versions that curled and tangled. The answer was lead, a toxic metal woven directly into the strands that made them hang perfectly straight. Every time someone adjusted the tinsel, particles drifted into the air, settling onto carpets, furniture, and the hands of children who could not resist touching them. When researchers connected lead tinsel to health concerns, especially for young children who put everything in their mouths, regulators moved swiftly. The shimmer that once defined Christmas mornings became a symbol of hidden danger inside innocent traditions. Lighting fireworks for Christmas Eve or midnight mass was an unexpected but beloved holiday tradition in certain parts of the United States. The winter sky would crack open with bursts of color, echoing through neighborhoods that were otherwise quiet and peaceful. Families bundled up in coats, stood on porches, and watched sparks rain down like tiny stars falling just for them. It was loud, dramatic, and incredibly festive. No one thought much about permits or safety laws or whether fireworks were allowed during the winter season. For many, it was simply a way to make the holy night feel even more magical and exciting. Today, though, fireworks are heavily restricted, and setting them off without approval can lead to fines or even arrest. The sound that once meant celebration now signals a code violation. It is strange how quickly something joyful can shift into something forbidden. But memories of those nights still glow warmly in the hearts of people who lived through them, especially when the air gets cold and the world gets quiet enough to remind them of the past. Few things smell as comforting as butter-flavored popcorn fresh from the microwave. But behind that warm, golden aroma was a secret chemical called diacetyl. In the early 2000s, factory workers who inhaled the buttery fumes began developing severe lung conditions later called popcorn lung. The discovery shocked the public. People started looking at their microwaves differently, realizing that even a bag of popcorn could hold a hidden danger. Families who once filled their homes with that smell of movie night joy now hesitated, torn between comfort and caution. Something so innocent, something made for movie nights and family gatherings, could actually hurt the people who made it. The lawsuits came fast, and major brands were forced to abandon diacetyl. The new formulas never quite smelled the same. Yet even now, the old scent still lives in memory, rich, smooth, and dangerously nostalgic. It reminds us that comfort sometimes comes with a cost, and that the sweetest smells can carry stories we were never meant to breathe in. Sodium benzoate soft drinks in metal cans were the silent experiment no one asked for. The preservative sodium benzoate was widely used to keep sodas fresh and prevent spoilage. It seemed harmless. But when manufacturers began packaging those sodas in aluminum cans, they created an accidental chemistry experiment. The acid in the soda reacted with both the metal and the preservative, forming trace amounts of benzene, a known carcinogen. The reaction was slow and invisible, but over time it turned sealed cans into ticking health hazards. Consumers had no idea. The drinks tasted the same, fizzy and bright, a staple at picnics and drive-ins. When scientists finally uncovered the problem in the 1980s, it was a public relations nightmare. Companies rushed to change formulas, remove sodium benzoate, and test for safety. But the damage to trust had already been done. It was another case of innovation outpacing caution, of chemistry being used before it was fully understood. The soda cans of the 1950s represented the excitement of a new age, but also its recklessness. They glimmered with promise, even as they carried a danger that no one could see. And just like that, something as innocent as a soft drink became another entry in the long list of modern mistakes. Asbestos snow blankets for tree skirts were considered the height of holiday elegance in the 1980s, spreading across floors beneath decorated trees like freshly fallen powder. These fluffy white sheets looked impossibly realistic, creating that perfect winter scene families saw in department store windows. Parents carefully arranged them each December, tucking the edges around tree stands and piling wrapped gifts on top as if presents had landed in fresh snow. Nobody suspected that the fibers making the blankets so soft and flame-resistant were the same ones doctors would later connect to devastating lung diseases. Children crawled across them reaching for presents, pets napped on their surfaces, and vacuum cleaners stirred up invisible clouds every time someone tidied the living room. The asbestos fibers did not announce themselves with smell or texture. They simply drifted into the air and settled into lungs where they remained for decades. When health authorities recognized the danger, blankets were pulled from shelves and homes were urged to dispose of them carefully. What once symbolized cozy holiday perfection became a chilling reminder that comfort can carry invisible costs. Homemade extension cord octopus plugs for tree lights were one of those wildly creative, wildly unsafe tricks families used without hesitation in the 1970s. You would see a single outlet powering an entire forest of cords behind the tree, all tangled together like someone tried to knit with electricity. These improvised clusters allowed families to plug in the lights, the rotating tree stand, the music box, and maybe even an extra lamp or two. No one worried about overheating or sparks or overloaded circuits. It was simply the only way to make everything work with the limited outlets older homes had. People trusted their instincts, not safety manuals. Today, though, building or using something like that is a clear violation of electrical codes. You can be fined, cited, or required to remove them immediately. Modern power strips have surge protection, insulation rules, and testing certifications because the old methods caused more fires than most families ever knew. The shift feels huge when you think about it. Back then it was creativity. Today it is negligence. But anyone who grew up during those years remembers crouching behind the tree, plugging one more cord into the impossible cluster, hoping it stayed together just long enough to make the living room glow. Bleached flour with benzoyl peroxide was sold as the purest, whitest flour money could buy. Housewives loved it. It looked clean, modern, and scientifically improved. The bleaching process made the flour snow white, a symbol of quality and refinement in mid-century kitchens. In an age obsessed with hygiene and purity, white meant progress, and the food industry knew it. Magazines ran full-page ads showing spotless kitchens and immaculate loaves, as if color itself could signal contamination. The reality was far less pristine. Each bag carried traces of industrial chemicals that no one could pronounce. But the same chemical used to bleach the flour was also used in industrial processes, including plastics and cleaning agents. Over time, scientists found that benzoyl peroxide left behind chemical residues that affected digestion and possibly the nervous system. The flour looked perfect but carried unseen consequences. Bakers noticed something too. The bread made with it tasted flat, lifeless, and oddly sterile. By the time regulators banned the practice, America had learned another hard truth. Food does not need to look perfect to be good. Natural color, once seen as old-fashioned, became a mark of authenticity. The ghost white loaves of the 1950s gave way to the golden brown of something real again. Back in the 1970s, a strange panic swept the candy aisle, the disappearance of red M&Ms. The culprit was red dye number 2, a synthetic coloring agent suspected of being carcinogenic. Mars pulled the red candies entirely, even though the specific dye was never used in M&Ms to begin with. Still, perception was stronger than fact. The empty red spaces in the bag made the other colors feel lonelier, like a rainbow missing its heart. Parents whispered warnings while kids traded rumors about the candy that could supposedly kill you. For almost a decade, the world's favorite chocolate candy had no red pieces. Kids traded theories on playgrounds and stared at colorless handfuls, wondering what was so dangerous about red. When red M&Ms finally returned with a new formula, it felt like a national celebration. People did not just get a color back, They got a piece of the past restored. It is funny how something so small could symbolize trust, fear, and nostalgia all at once. Today, that red candy means something different. It is a tiny reminder of how our food and our fears often share the same shade. Tris-treated children's sleepwear was once advertised as the pinnacle of safety, promising to protect kids from one of the biggest fears parents had at the time: house fires. These pajamas were soft, colorful, and seemed like the responsible choice, marketed directly to families who wanted their children to sleep safely through the night. Grandparents bought them with complete trust, believing that anything labeled flame retardant must be a step forward in home safety. But the chemical tris did not stay in the fabric. It rubbed off onto skin, onto sheets, and into the air. Children breathed as they slept. When these findings became public, the revelation shocked parents. Nationwide regulators moved quickly, banning tris-treated sleepwear and forcing companies to recall products already in homes. Those pajamas became one of the most infamous examples of how good intentions can lead to dangerous mistakes. Those shiny silver balls that once sparkled on Christmas cookies were more than decoration. They were tradition. Every family had them, tucked away in a jar beside colored sprinkles. They were called silver dragées, tiny metallic orbs that made cakes and wedding desserts shimmer like jewelry. In the glow of candlelight or under frosting, they looked almost too beautiful to eat. And, as it turned out, they were. The Food and Drug Administration banned them after discovering the metallic coating contained real silver, which is not considered edible. For years, bakers had sprinkled actual metal onto desserts without realizing the potential health risk. It was not toxic in small amounts, but the government could not take chances. By the early 2000s, the silver balls disappeared from American stores, relegated to "for decoration only" status. Still, people continued using them secretly, claiming no holiday cookie looked complete without that touch of sparkle. They became a quiet act of nostalgia, a bit of rebellion wrapped in frosting. Even now, older recipe books list them casually, as though nothing ever changed. There was magic in those metallic sweets, a reminder that sometimes beauty and danger can share the same shine, and that not everything meant for the eye should ever meet the tongue. Olestra fat-free snack foods were supposed to change the world, or at least the waistlines of America. When they hit the shelves in the 1990s, people could not believe it. Potato chips with all the flavor and none of the fat. Ads promised guilt-free indulgence, a revolution in snacking. The secret was Olestra, a synthetic fat molecule that passed through the body undigested. The science seemed sound, the dream flawless, until people started eating it. Within months, complaints poured in. The chips tasted fine, but they came with a terrible side effect: sudden, uncontrollable digestive distress. The phrase "anal leakage" became an unintentional part of pop culture. Consumers were horrified, and late-night comedians had a field day. Regulators eventually forced warning labels on Olestra products, and the once promising miracle faded into embarrassment. For a while, the brand tried to rebrand and reformulate, but the damage was done. People no longer trusted any food that claimed to cheat nature. The shelves emptied, and the name Olestra joined the long list of scientific missteps dressed up as progress. It was the perfect lesson of the modern food age. You can outsmart fat, but not the body. Letting kids sit on Santa's lap without background checks for performers was as normal as candy canes in the 1970s. Every mall, store, and community center had a Santa who showed up for a few weeks each year, ready to greet every child with a warm laugh and a holiday smile. Parents lined up without a second thought, snapping photos as their kids clutched Santa's coat and whispered their wishes for Christmas morning. People believed deeply in the goodness of the role, not the resume behind it. Santa was seen as a symbol of kindness, not a figure who needed screening or verification. Trust was the wrapping paper that held the whole tradition together. No one asked about training or screening or documentation. It was simply assumed that Santa was safe. The world trusted the suit, the beard, and the magic behind the role. Today, though, every performer must be vetted, monitored, and cleared under strict regulations. The innocence of the moment is now wrapped in paperwork and policies. Maybe it is necessary, but it also reminds us of a time when trust came easier and magic needed no signatures. Flammable celluloid decoration figurines stood on mantels and windowsills throughout the 1980s, their detailed features and translucent glow making them favorites among collectors and casual decorators. Families displayed delicate Santas, angels, and nativity figures near candles and warm light bulbs, admiring how the thin materials seemed to glow from within. Children loved examining the intricate details molded into each piece, handling them carefully because they seemed precious. What nobody realized was that celluloid, one of the earliest plastics, was essentially solidified nitrocellulose that could ignite with startling speed. A figurine placed too close to a candle or hot bulb could burst into fire within seconds, burning so rapidly that reaction was impossible. Families who arranged these decorations near heat sources unknowingly created fire hazards. When fire investigations traced holiday blazes back to these figurines, regulations ended their production. The delicate beauty that graced displays became a symbol of how flammable materials infiltrated homes during an era of limited safety testing. Using asbestos-based fake snow for decor sounds unthinkable today, but in the 1970s it was still floating around in attics, storage boxes, and leftover holiday supplies from even earlier decades. Families sprinkled it across mantels, nativity scenes, and Christmas village displays without a hint of hesitation because it looked stunningly real. It clung beautifully, stayed in place, and made every surface look winter-kissed, even if the weather outside refused to cooperate. Most people never imagined that the soft white powder carried risks far beyond messiness. The word asbestos simply did not trigger panic yet, at least not in the way it does today. Back then, you were more focused on making your holiday decor look as magical as possible, especially if you were working on a budget and wanted your home to feel special. Today, possession or use of anything containing asbestos can bring legal trouble, health warnings, and removal orders. It is one of those dramatic shifts where science taught us something we wish we had known earlier. But when people look back at old photos, they do not remember the danger. They remember the tiny hillside of white powder beneath the ceramic houses, the shimmer on the mantel, and how perfectly it tied the whole scene together. Tinned fish packed in PCB-laced oil was once considered a healthy, protein-rich option for busy families. Tuna, sardines, and anchovies sat neatly in shiny metal tins, waiting to become quick lunches or midnight snacks. The oil inside kept them moist and flavorful, but it also carried a hidden poison. At the time, convenience was king, and no one thought to question what made those tins last so long on the shelf. Housewives trusted the packaging, the labels, and the smiling faces in the ads that promised ocean-fresh flavor. The irony was cruel. In trying to make food safer from spoilage, manufacturers had filled it with something far worse. Polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs, were used in industrial lubricants and electrical equipment. Somehow, they found their way into the oils used for food preservation, contaminating entire batches of canned fish. PCBs did not break down easily. They accumulated in the body, linked to cancers and reproductive harm. At the time, no one had a clue that a simple tuna sandwich could contain a chemical cousin of motor oil. When the scandal finally broke, it rocked the seafood industry and reshaped how food safety was monitored. Factories were overhauled, regulations tightened, and faith in clean eating took a heavy blow. The sea that had fed generations now carried a warning label of its own. Orbitz was the drink that looked more like a science experiment than a thirst quencher. In the late 1990s, kids would stop in the grocery store aisle just to stare at the bottles, bright liquids with tiny gelatin spheres suspended inside, floating like little planets in a lava lamp. It was supposed to be futuristic, a drink you could both sip and watch. The first sip was strange, a mix of sweet syrup and jelly-like orbs drifting on your tongue. For some, it was a revelation. For others, pure confusion. But no one could deny that it was unlike anything else on Earth. People were fascinated, but they were also confused. The texture was unlike anything they had ever felt. Too thick to gulp, too thin to chew. The Food and Drug Administration soon stepped in, failing the product's stability tests because the suspended beads did not stay evenly distributed over time. Bottles leaked, clumps formed, and the novelty turned into a sticky mess. Within 2 years, Orbitz disappeared from shelves, remembered more for its weirdness than its taste. But for those who tried it, the memory still feels strangely magical. A moment when food and science collided in the most bizarre way imaginable. It might not have lasted long, but it showed how curiosity could make something as simple as a drink feel like a glimpse into the future. Mercury glass thermometers were something almost every grandparent kept tucked away in a kitchen drawer or medicine cabinet, sitting there like a tiny silver secret no one ever questioned. Back then, seeing that bright metallic line move up and down felt like watching real science happen right in your own home, and nobody knew that this simple tool carried a danger far larger than its size. People trusted these thermometers because they were reliable, they were familiar, and they were passed down through generations. What folks never realized was that one slip, one crack, or one drop on the bathroom floor could release a toxic metal that never goes away. Mercury did not just evaporate harmlessly. It lingered, it pooled, and it seeped into tiny corners nobody noticed. Doctors later discovered how dangerous even small exposures were, and suddenly something that once helped families monitor their health became a serious household hazard. There is something unsettling about realizing that a tool used to protect your family once carried such a hidden threat. Bubble lights with methylene chloride fluid were absolutely mesmerizing to children in the 1980s, their colorful tubes gurgling and bubbling as the heat from tiny bulbs brought the mysterious liquid inside to life. Families clipped them onto tree branches and watched the little towers of light dance with movement that seemed magical compared to ordinary static bulbs. Kids pressed their faces close, hypnotized by the rising bubbles that looked like tiny celebrations happening inside each glass tube. The colors glowed warmly, casting reflections across ornaments and tinsel while filling living rooms with that unmistakable holiday atmosphere everyone craved. What nobody realized was that the liquid creating those beautiful bubbles contained methylene chloride, a chemical capable of causing serious harm if the glass cracked or shattered. Parents placed these lights within easy reach of curious hands, never imagining that a broken tube could release dangerous vapors. When researchers documented the risks and regulators intervened, the charming bubble lights of childhood became cautionary examples of how enchanting designs can mask genuine hazards. Glass ornament string lights that overheated were practically the heartbeat of Christmas decor in the 1970s. When you plugged them in, the whole house lit up with colors that felt warm, deep, and slightly dramatic, something modern LED lights never quite managed to recreate. The bulbs were thick and glossy, the kind you could tap lightly and hear a tiny clink as if they were miniature ornaments in their own right. Every family had at least one set, sometimes passed down from older relatives who swore by their glow. Of course, those bulbs burned hot enough to toast your fingers if you held them too long, but that was part of the charm. You learned to respect them the same way you respected stovetops or ovens. Today, though, anything that overheats even slightly is pulled off the shelves before it ever reaches a living room. Modern electrical codes ban lights with certain wiring thickness and heat output, and anything with a glass bulb is quietly pushed into the category of retro danger. But those lights had personality. They flickered softly, they hummed ever so slightly, and when one bulb went out, the entire string went dark, sending the family into a comedic treasure hunt to find the culprit. That memory stays warm in a way the lights never did. Coca-Cola with real coca extract was one of those open secrets everyone knew but no one mentioned. The original formula, created decades earlier, contained trace amounts of coca leaf, the same plant used to make cocaine. By the 1950s, the company claimed to have removed it, but in some rural bottling plants, the old recipe still found its way into production. It gave the soda a unique kick, a kind of energy that people swore by. No one called it addiction back then. They just said it helped them get through the day. Coca-Cola was more than a drink. It was America's tonic, its pick-me-up, its symbol of modern energy. But once the truth became impossible to ignore, Coca-Cola quietly changed its process for good. What was left was still iconic, but a little less wild, a little more safe. It's funny to think that one of the most innocent brands in American history was once powered by something so forbidden. Finally, there were the tamarindo lollipops from Mexico, sweet, sour, and dusted with chili powder. Kids loved them for their bold flavor, something that made American candies seem plain by comparison. They were a favorite at corner stores and fiestas alike, a little piece of imported joy. But beneath that spicy coating lurked something deadly. When the news broke about the lead contamination, it spread through communities like heartbreak. Parents who had grown up eating them now had to take them away from their own children, turning joy into fear. Investigations revealed that some batches were contaminated with lead, not just in the candy itself, but in the packaging and ink used on wrappers. The ban came swiftly, and shipments stopped overnight. Families who had grown up with those treats felt an unexpected sense of loss. What was once a taste of culture and childhood became a cautionary tale about oversight and safety. Yet for many, that flavor, the heat, the tang, the sweetness, still carries memories of home. It is strange how something that once united so many people could be forbidden so suddenly. But maybe that is what nostalgia is all about, remembering what we loved even when we were not supposed to. Few experiences from 1970s gym class were as invasive as the uniform check. Gym teachers demanded absolute conformity. Every student had to wear the exact school-issued shorts and shirts, no exceptions. Before class began, teachers would sometimes order students to line up and lift their shirts slightly or tug their shorts to show the waistband, proving they were wearing the correct outfit underneath. Some students froze in embarrassment, their faces burning as teachers walked the line. Others tried to laugh it off, but the unease lingered long after class ended. The smell of sweat, the sound of whistles, and the echo of orders made those inspections feel like tiny military drills. If anyone forgot or substituted their own clothes, it meant detention or a lower grade. In some schools, girls were told to change in front of one another, and privacy barely existed. It was not just about uniforms, it was about control and compliance. Teachers believed enforcing sameness built unity, but it only built resentment and discomfort. For some students, those checks were humiliating and frightening, especially when teachers crossed personal boundaries in the name of discipline. Years later, those same rules feel unthinkable. What was once called routine inspection would now be recognized for what it truly was, an invasion of personal space that stripped students of both comfort and dignity. Slap bracelets were everywhere in the late 1980s. Classrooms, malls, playgrounds. Kids collected them by the dozen, showing off neon colors and wild patterns. The trick was simple. Snap the straight band against your wrist and watch it curl around perfectly. Some kids took it a step further, slapping them across backpacks, arms, and even faces in playful fights. The noise of a dozen bracelets snapping at once could fill an entire hallway, driving teachers insane. For a few glorious years, they were the ultimate symbol of rebellion, something that annoyed adults but made you instantly cool. But beneath that fabric lay a thin strip of sharp-edged metal. Over time, the covering wore down or tore, revealing the raw steel underneath. Soon, reports of cut wrists and sliced skin started pouring in. Some schools banned them outright, calling them distracting and dangerous. Still, the craze was unstoppable for a while. Every kid wanted to hear that satisfying snap, no matter how many warnings came from teachers or parents. They were the perfect mix of rebellion and style, a fashion statement that literally left its mark. Appearance was everything, especially for girls. Teachers and administrators conducted random hair and makeup checks, deciding what was acceptable based on personal taste. Too much eyeliner, lipstick, or nail polish could get a girl sent home. Some schools even banned mascara altogether. Teachers would stand by mirrors or locker areas, pointing out excess makeup like it was a disciplinary issue. A smudge of eyeliner could turn into a lecture on morality, while chipped nail polish was labeled sloppy. For many young girls, getting ready for school felt less like preparation for class and more like preparing for judgment. The rule was that beauty should be natural, but what that really meant was controlled. Boys could be messy and scruffy, girls had to look clean, proper, and calm. These inspections turned self-expression into a source of anxiety. Many women who went to school then still remember the sting of a teacher's comment about their looks. The classroom mirror reflected not learning, but judgment, and it taught young girls that appearance mattered more than voice. Pressure cookers without safety valves were once found in nearly every grandparent's kitchen, sitting on stovetops like sturdy metal workhorses ready to tackle any meal. These early models built pressure quickly, helping families cook stews, beans, and soups in a fraction of the usual time. Back then, efficiency was everything, and these cookers felt like the future of fast home cooking. People trusted them wholeheartedly, believing their heavy lids and thick walls made them fail-proof. But without proper safety valves, internal pressure had nowhere to escape when temperatures got too high. That built-up steam turned the cooker into a ticking bomb, capable of launching lids across kitchens or sending boiling food erupting in every direction. Stories of exploding pots became alarmingly common, with many home cooks experiencing burns or shattered kitchen walls. When regulators finally stepped in, they began enforcing strict safety standards that required multiple release mechanisms. Modern pressure cookers are far safer, but those older models left a legacy of caution in many households. Grandparents who lived through these accidents often share their stories with a mix of humor and relief, but the danger was real and unforgettable. Today, it is difficult to imagine using a pot that could explode without warning, yet it was once a routine part of home cooking. These early cookers serve as a reminder that progress sometimes comes with painful lessons. Before energy drinks or sports beverages, there were jungle juice barrels, tiny plastic jugs filled with sweet fluorescent liquid. They were cheap everywhere and perfectly sized for a kid's hand. The foil tops peeled back with a satisfying pop, releasing a sugary scent that screamed childhood. You could buy a handful for the change in your pocket, clutching them like treasure all the way home. The colors, bright blue, cherry red, electric green, felt alive, like liquid candy glowing under sunlight. Kids would trade flavors at lunch tables, sipping victory through tiny straws. But those bright colors and low prices came at a cost. The dyes used in some batches were later found to violate safety standards, and the thin plastic barrels posed choking and contamination risks. The Food and Drug Administration cracked down, and the barrels disappeared from stores. Still, everyone who grew up in the 90s remembers seeing them stacked in pyramids at grocery entrances, 5 for $1, glowing like treasure. It was the drink of summer camps, playgrounds, and birthday parties. Today, the thought of drinking one might make adults cringe, but for a generation of kids, that syrupy taste still feels like home. Canned meats preserved in nitrate salts looked like pure perfection. The color was bright pink, the flavor smoky, and the shelf life impressive. Housewives of the 1950s trusted them completely, serving slices of corned beef, deviled ham, and luncheon loaf without a second thought. It seemed like progress in a can, modern science keeping dinner safe and pretty. But what scientists would later discover about nitrates changed everything. When heated, these salts created nitrosamines, compounds linked to cancer and heart disease. That beautiful pink hue came at a dangerous cost. Even after the first warnings, it took years for consumers to believe that something so familiar could be deadly. People argued it was overblown, calling it just another scare. But soon, the facts became impossible to ignore. Those rosy slices were proof that sometimes color itself can lie. Doctors began warning families that the same food they fed their children could be silently poisoning them. By the time regulations caught up, generations had already grown up on nitrate-packed meat. It was a harsh lesson. Beauty in food can be deadly if you do not ask what makes it shine. What had once been the color of convenience turned into the warning color of caution. Letting children knock on strangers' doors for caroling after dark was a treasured tradition in the 1970s. Kids bundled in scarves and mittens would walk from house to house, singing off-key, giggling between verses, and soaking up every ounce of attention from the adults who stepped outside to listen. There was a quiet trust holding the whole neighborhood together, the kind that let parents breathe easy in ways that feel impossible today. Children felt like they belonged to every house on the block, not just their own. And the darkness never felt threatening, only exciting. Neighbors welcomed them with cookies, cocoa, or a few pennies dropped into mittened hands. It felt safe, wholesome, and deeply connected to the spirit of the season. No parent hovered. No one followed behind in a car. The neighborhood itself acted like a guardian, watching over the wandering chorus. Today, though, the world is far more cautious. Children knocking on doors unsupervised is discouraged or outright banned in many places due to safety concerns and privacy rules. What was once a simple way to spread cheer has become a complicated question of risk. But the memory of singing beneath porch lights, breath turning to mist in the winter air, never fades. Trichloroethylene cleaned ornament sets filled store shelves in the 1980s, their gleaming surfaces reflecting the promise of perfect holiday displays. Manufacturers used this powerful industrial solvent to remove oils and residue from mass-produced ornaments before packaging, leaving that flawless shine customers expected. Families unpacked boxes each December, handling pieces that still carried traces of the cleaning chemical in tiny surface imperfections. The solvent evaporated slowly at room temperature, releasing fumes that accumulated in closed storage boxes and drifted into living rooms once ornaments hung on heated trees. Children who helped unpack decorations breathed concentrated vapors from freshly opened boxes without recognizing the smell as dangerous. Parents arranged these gleaming spheres on branches, never suspecting the perfect shine came with invisible health costs. When researchers linked trichloroethylene to liver damage and cancer, manufacturers switched to safer methods. The pristine ornaments that represented holiday perfection became examples of how industrial shortcuts entered family homes. Aquadots were a toy that promised endless creativity with just a few drops of water, but they became infamous for an entirely different reason. The tiny, colorful beads could be arranged into shapes and designs, and when sprayed with water, they stuck together magically. Kids loved how simple and satisfying it was. Many children turned their kitchen tables into art studios, proudly crafting hearts, stars, and animals that shimmered like candy. The bright colors and glossy texture made them irresistible, even to toddlers who were too young to play safely. Parents praised the toys' creativity at first, never imagining that the harmless beads could turn into something so dangerous. But soon after their release, reports emerged that children were falling sick after swallowing the beads. Tests revealed that the coating contained a compound that turned toxic inside the body, producing a chemical similar to a date-rape drug. Panic spread quickly among parents, and the product was pulled from store shelves worldwide. For many families, it was a wake-up call about how even the most innocent-looking toy could hide a sinister danger. The recall was massive, and Aquadots became a symbol of the dark side of 1980s-style creativity, colorful, exciting, and completely reckless. What was meant to be an art toy ended up in the history books as one of the most shocking product failures of the decade. In the 1970s, a troubling gray area existed in schools, teachers dating former students. It was not technically against the rules once the student graduated, but that loophole carried a disturbing undertone. In small towns where everyone knew everyone, a relationship between a teacher and a recent graduate was sometimes seen as romantic rather than exploitative. Teachers held enormous power and influence, and that dynamic did not suddenly vanish with a diploma. Many of these relationships began with years of familiarity, mentorships that quietly blurred into something more. Some teachers waited until a student's 18th birthday to make a move, proudly insisting it was perfectly legal. Administrators often looked the other way, treating it as a private matter instead of a professional violation. The cultural mindset was permissive. Adults were rarely questioned about their behavior, and young people were assumed to be mature enough to decide. But beneath the surface, it reflected a system that misunderstood consent and normalized imbalance. Today, that behavior would end a career instantly, but back then, it was whispered about more than punished. Former students who experienced it were left with confusing feelings, validation mixed with unease, affection intertwined with manipulation. The line between teacher and student was never meant to be crossed, yet for many in that era, it was erased by silence. What people once dismissed as harmless now stands as a stark reminder of how power can hide in plain sight. Handheld hair dryers without ground fault protection were once an everyday sight in your grandparents' homes, used casually near sinks and bathtubs without anyone thinking twice. These early dryers felt modern and powerful, delivering hot air much faster than older models, and families trusted them completely. People used them in tight bathrooms with damp floors, steam-filled mirrors, and water splashing everywhere. Back then, nobody understood how easily electricity and water could turn a simple routine into a life-threatening moment. If these dryers slipped, touched water, or shorted out, there was nothing to stop a surge of electricity from traveling straight through the device. Many accidents happened quietly, without warning, leaving families stunned by how quickly a normal morning could turn tragic. Over time, regulators stepped in and required ground fault protection to keep bathroom outlets and appliances safe. Today, it is difficult to imagine a world where a hairdryer had no automatic safety shutoff at all. Surge soda was the liquid embodiment of the word extreme. Released in the mid-90s as Coca-Cola's answer to Mountain Dew, it came in a neon green can that looked like it could power a skateboard. The drink promised adrenaline in a bottle, an energy boost before energy drinks were even a thing. Every can felt like an invitation to chaos, an explosion of sugar, caffeine, and citrus that hit harder than anything else on the shelf. The ads made you feel like cracking open a Surge could transform an ordinary afternoon into an action movie. For kids growing up in the 90s, drinking one felt like joining a secret club of unstoppable energy. Its marketing screamed rebellion, all graffiti logos, explosions, and kids jumping off rooftops. Every gulp was like tasting citrus chaos. Parents called it caffeinated sugar water, but that only made it cooler. Surge was banned in schools, whispered about like contraband, and adored by every kid who wanted to feel like a daredevil. It was more than soda. It was an attitude, a bright green middle finger to moderation. Even now, people remember that electric buzz, that rush of flavor that somehow felt alive. It wasn't just a drink. It was a moment in time bottled up for a generation that refused to slow down. Surge didn't just wake you up. It woke up an era. And when it vanished in the early 2000s, it left behind an entire generation of nostalgic fans who swore no drink has ever come close. For a moment, Surge wasn't just a beverage. It was the soundtrack to growing up loud. Aerosol cheese in steel cans was the kind of futuristic food that only the 1950s could have dreamed up. It was creamy, convenient, and somehow scientific. All the things that modern America was obsessed with at the time. Housewives marveled at how it could be sprayed directly onto crackers, celery sticks, or even straight into the mouth of a giggling child. It felt like progress you could taste. No knife, no cleanup, no effort. The secret behind the spray was pressure from chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, the same chemicals used in aerosol hairspray and refrigeration. They made the cheese foam perfectly, airy and light, and gave it that signature hiss when you pressed the nozzle. Nobody thought twice about it until scientists in the 1970s revealed that CFCs were eating away at the ozone layer, literally tearing a hole in the atmosphere. What had once been the pride of kitchen technology suddenly became an environmental villain. The cheese itself wasn't the problem. It was what made it spray that turned it into a global issue. Companies scrambled to replace the formula, switching to safer propellants, but the reputation stuck. The phrase "cheese in a can" went from novelty to punchline. For those who lived through its rise, it will always taste like nostalgia and a little bit of guilt. Letting kids play with plug and heated metal toy trains was a Christmas thrill that defined holiday mornings for many families in the 1970s. The train tracks would circle the tree, the transformer humming softly as the metal engine heated up during its rounds. Kids would lie on the carpet with their chins in their hands, inches from the rails, mesmerized as the tiny steam engine chugged past. Sometimes they touched the train even when it was hot, learning quickly to pull back with a little yelp and a laugh, but nobody panicked. These toys felt sturdy, impressive, and wonderfully real. Parents saw them as a step up from plastic toys, a sign that their children were old enough for something grown up. Today, though, plug-in metal trains with exposed heated parts are banned due to burn hazards, electrical risks, and fire concerns. Modern versions are cooler, sealed, and safer, but undeniably less dramatic. Something about the old ones felt alive, almost magical, like they had their own tiny heartbeat powered by electricity. When people think back on Christmas morning, it is often that warm glow, that little spark of danger and delight that they remember most vividly. Using metal icicles on outdoor power lines or bushes was one of those decorating shortcuts that nobody thought twice about in the 1970s. The thin silver strands caught the wind beautifully, shimmering like a curtain of winter stardust. People draped them anywhere they could, over hedges, fences, porch railings, and yes, sometimes even along the edges of outdoor wiring. It made houses sparkle in a way that modern plastic icicles never quite match. Kids would run their hands through the strands, watching them flutter and twist in the light. Nobody worried about electrical shorts. Lead crystal hanging prisms dangled from chandeliers and Christmas trees throughout the 1980s, their faceted surfaces splitting light into rainbow cascades that danced across walls and ceilings. Families treasured these elegant decorations, often receiving them as gifts or inheriting them from relatives who appreciated fine crystal craftsmanship. Children loved watching the colors shift and swirl whenever someone walked past or a breeze caught the dangling prisms. The crystal that made these rainbows so vivid contained lead oxide, which gave the glass its exceptional clarity and weight. Over time, especially in homes with varying humidity, the lead slowly migrated to the surface where it transferred onto hands during handling. Families who polished their prisms regularly absorbed more lead with every cleaning session. When scientists documented how lead crystal released toxic metal through normal use, warnings spread quickly through decorating communities. The dancing rainbows that elevated holiday decor now carry cautions about display and keeping them away from curious children. Unventilated indoor Christmas tree flocking was something that families approached with excitement instead of fear. In the 1970s, grabbing a can of artificial snow and coating the tree right in the middle of the living room felt like the best way to turn your home into a snowy postcard scene. Kids would gather around just to watch the powder fall onto the branches, building up that soft, white layer that made everything feel instantly festive. The smell, the sound, the little cloud that puffed up with every spray all felt like part of the fun. No one opened windows or wore masks or worried about what they were breathing in. The chemicals were just part of the magic, even if nobody knew it then. Today, though, this is the kind of thing that would get you in trouble faster than you could shake the can. Safety codes require ventilation, protective gear, or outright ban certain types of flocking materials. People talk about air quality and respiratory risks and things that were not even part of the vocabulary in the 1970s. Maybe it is for the best, but it is impossible to deny that the old way felt more enchanting. When you see old photos covered in that soft, snowy coating, you can almost smell the faint sweetness of the artificial snow and remember how proud everyone was of the winter scene they had created indoors. Hormone-injected super chickens were the pride of post-war America, a marvel of modern science that promised endless meat at low prices. Farmers injected birds with growth hormones to make them plumper and faster growing, cutting costs and feeding more people. Grocery stores proudly advertised bigger, better poultry that could roast in record time. The sight of a massive bird on the dinner table became a badge of success, a symbol that science and progress had conquered hunger. No one questioned why their chicken breasts had doubled in size or why the meat seemed strangely watery when cooked. They were too busy marveling at the miracle of abundance to see the price of tampering with nature. But what looked like progress soon sparked fear. Consumers began to wonder why their chickens looked unnaturally large and cooked down to almost nothing. Reports of hormone imbalances and health risks spread, and regulators stepped in. By the late 1950s, the practice was outlawed, leaving behind a trail of headlines and suspicion. The super chicken promised abundance but delivered anxiety instead. It became another cautionary tale of a century obsessed with faster, cheaper, and bigger, no matter the cost. Candy cigarettes looked harmless, but they carried a powerful message that shaped an entire generation's habits. Kids mimicked adults, holding the chalky white sticks between their fingers, pretending to take slow drags before puffing out imaginary smoke. They were part of every corner store display, next to bubble gum and jawbreakers, colorful boxes that proudly mirrored real cigarette brands. Back then, it was just make-believe fun, a little way to act grown up. But as health awareness grew and smoking rates dropped, society realized that these candies were more than innocent play. They were marketing addiction wrapped in sugar. The government banned them for encouraging underage smoking and normalizing tobacco culture. Yet for many who grew up in the 70s or 80s, the memory lingers. You can still recall the chalky taste, the white powder coating your lips, the cool swagger of pretending to be older than you were. It was a candy that told kids to dream dangerously, and even though it is gone, its image still smolders like a cigarette that refuses to die out completely. Paraformaldehyde closet deodorizers were once the hidden secret to keeping a home smelling fresh, tucked into closets and drawers like quiet guardians of cleanliness. Grandparents hung them beside winter coats, wool sweaters, and blankets, trusting that these little blocks would keep everything smelling crisp and free of musty odors. People believed they were doing something good for their clothes, protecting them from moisture and mildew during long storage seasons. But paraformaldehyde did not just freshen the air. It released fumes that were irritating to the eyes and lungs, creating an invisible cloud inside small enclosed spaces. Every time someone opened the closet door, they breathed in vapors known to cause headaches, coughing, and long-term respiratory issues. These deodorizers were eventually banned, and families were urged to switch to safer alternatives. Today, these closet blocks serve as a reminder that a pleasant scent is not always a sign of safety. Hair became another target of control, especially for boys. If your hair touched your collar or ears, you risked suspension or public humiliation. Principals would walk the halls with rulers, checking length against the dress code. Long hair was seen as a threat, a sign of rebellion, nonconformity, or even moral weakness. Some schools kept scissors in the office to fix violations on the spot. For many students, hair became a quiet protest against authority, a way to express individuality when few other options existed. Parents argued with schools, but change came slowly. The hair wars of the 1970s were about more than style. They were about identity, freedom, and the right to be different in a system built to make everyone the same. The He-Man power sword turned every backyard into a battlefield. Inspired by the cartoon hero himself, the hard plastic sword was big, bright, and built for action. Every child who held it shouted, "I have the power!" usually before whacking a sibling or neighbor. There was a kind of magic in that sword, especially when paired with the He-Man action figures in Saturday morning reruns. Kids wore makeshift capes made from bath towels and staged epic battles in the yard, believing they were saving the universe. Of course, those heroic duels often ended with someone crying, a broken toy, and a lecture from an exhausted parent. The sword's tough design meant it could take a beating, but that also meant it delivered one. Black eyes, bruised arms, and a few broken lamps later, parents started realizing this toy might have been too realistic. The problem was not just the sword, it was the energy it unleashed in every kid who wielded it. The toy was eventually reworked with softer plastic, but by then, countless kids had already discovered their inner warrior and their parents' limits for patience. It remains one of the most iconic but dangerous toy weapons of the decade, symbolizing both the imagination and chaos that defined 1980s playtime. Charcoal Berry Fin Kool-Aid might just be the most whimsical flavor ever made. Inspired by the company's famous mascot, it mixed red, pink, and orange into a swirl of fruity chaos that tasted like every childhood sleepover combined. It came with its own cartoon shark and promised an ocean of fun. The packets were bright and bold, almost glowing under store lights, and they begged to be taken home. Kids mixed it in cloudy pitchers, stirring up tides of color that looked too good to be real. Parents pretended not to notice the sugar storms brewing in their kitchens, smiling as laughter spilled over the countertops. But hidden beneath the playful name was an ingredient that would lead to its downfall: red dye number 3. The same chemical that gave it that glowing sunset hue was later found to cause thyroid tumors in animal tests. The Food and Drug Administration moved to restrict its use, and Sharkleberry Fin quietly disappeared. Fans still talk about it online, sharing photos of vintage packets like relics of a lost world. For them, it was not just about the flavor. It was about the feeling of summer, freedom, and bright plastic pitchers filled with imagination. Some say no drink since has captured that kind of joy. Angel Hair spun fiberglass was the ethereal finishing touch that turned ordinary Christmas trees into something heavenly in the 1980s. Families pulled wispy strands from plastic bags and draped them carefully across branches, creating that soft, cloud-like glow that made every tree look like it belonged in a winter fairy tale. The material caught light beautifully, shimmering with an almost supernatural quality that delighted children who begged to help with decorating. Parents encouraged them to join in, watching tiny fingers stretch the delicate fibers across greenery without any idea what those strands actually contained. Angel Hair was made from spun fiberglass, and every touch released microscopic shards that embedded in skin, floated into eyes, and drifted into lungs with each excited breath. Kids often complained of itchy hands or irritated eyes after decorating, symptoms parents dismissed as holiday excitement or dry winter air. When health experts finally identified the respiratory risks and skin irritation caused by these fibers, the dreamy decoration was banned. Angel Hair remains a bittersweet memory of how something beautiful could leave invisible damage. Neighborhood gift swaps with homemade alcohol were common during the 1970s, especially among adults who loved giving bottles of homemade wine, spiced rum, or boozy eggnog. It was a heartfelt gesture, something made with time and care that carried the spirit of the season. People laughed as they compared recipes, shared bottles after dinner, or kept them for Christmas Eve gatherings. Every bottle told a story of family traditions, of trial and error, of batches that turned out perfect, and batches that definitely did not. Sharing it felt like sharing a piece of your home, and receiving it felt like being invited into someone else's. No one worried about licensing or alcohol regulations. It was community, plain and simple. Today, though, giving or trading unlicensed alcohol is illegal in many states. The law sees risk where people once saw generosity, but for those who lived it, those clinking bottles remain part of Christmas memory, warm and unmistakably human. Prepackaged luncheon meats were a post-war convenience that fit neatly into America's new rhythm. Busy days, quick lunches, no waste. Sliced, sealed, and ready to eat, these meats were the modern worker's dream. They filled sandwiches, lunchboxes, and picnic baskets across the nation. What no one realized was that heating them could trigger a dangerous reaction. The nitrates used to preserve their bright pink color produced nitrosamines, chemical compounds linked to cancer. Commercials showed happy families eating these sandwiches in spotless kitchens, while factories quietly churned out meats laced with preservatives no one could pronounce. It was the dawn of the convenience age, when speed and shelf life mattered more than nutrition. And like so many mid-century innovations, it took years before anyone asked what we were actually putting in our bodies. For years, people fried or broiled their sandwiches, unknowingly creating toxins right on their stovetops. Once scientists uncovered the truth, the industry was forced to reformulate, and entire brands vanished overnight. Luncheon meat never quite recovered its innocence. What was once a symbol of post-war efficiency became a reminder that convenience can carry a hidden cost. Surge soda was more than a drink. It was a cultural explosion. Released in the 1990s as a direct rival to Mountain Dew, It promised high energy, loud flavor, and total chaos in a can. Teenagers swore by it. Advertisements showed skateboarders, gamers, and thrill-seekers cracking open cans of electric green liquid and living like every day was the X Games. Kids chugged it before school, hoping to stay awake through class, while parents called it liquid lightning. Surge wasn't just a soda, it was an attitude, a lifestyle captured in caffeine and sugar. For some, it was the first taste of rebellion in a can. The sugar and caffeine content was off the charts, and schools quickly started banning it from vending machines after reports of hyperactivity and caffeine crashes. Parents complained, health experts warned, and by the early 2000s, Surge had fizzled out. Years later, fans campaigned to bring it back, and Coca-Cola gave them a short revival. But it was never quite the same. The original Surge felt like freedom, a little reckless, a little dangerous, and a lot of fun. It was the taste of youth with no limits, bottled in neon green and sealed with a rush of pure nostalgia. Copper arsenate weed killers were once a common tool for grandparents who prided themselves on tidy lawns and well-kept gardens. These powders and sprays were marketed as powerful solutions that destroyed stubborn weeds without harming surrounding plants. Homeowners used them along sidewalks, flower beds, and backyards, believing they had discovered the secret to a perfectly maintained outdoor space. Back then, people trusted whatever the store shelves offered, confident that anything sold publicly must be safe. But copper arsenate contains real arsenic, a toxic heavy metal capable of lingering in soil for decades. As families worked in their yards, small clouds of dust drifted into the air, onto hands, or into the dirt where children later played. Pets walked through treated sections unknowingly, and rain spread the residue even farther than people expected. When researchers documented the extent of soil contamination and health risks, regulators banned the use of these weed killers for residential areas. Many families were stunned to learn that their once prized lawns had absorbed hazardous chemicals from years of enthusiastic yard work. Even today, some older properties still test positive for lingering arsenic near garden beds or fence lines. These weed killers serve as a sobering reminder that quick fixes in landscaping can sometimes carry long-lasting consequences that future generations inherit without knowing. Teachers lighting up inside classrooms sounds unbelievable today, but in the 1970s it was as common as chalk dust. Many teachers had ashtrays right on their desks and a lit cigarette balanced between their fingers while they lectured. Smoke curled around overhead projectors, and the air was thick by the end of the day. Students sat quietly, breathing it all in, not daring to complain. Some teachers even used cigarettes as part of their persona, the cool teacher with rolled-up sleeves and a cloud of smoke overhead. It symbolized authority and adulthood, not addiction. Looking back, it is astonishing how normalized it was to fill a room of children with secondhand smoke. What we now call dangerous was once seen as sophistication. The classroom might have been filled with lessons, but the air itself was toxic. Moon shoes promised the dream of anti-gravity, a trampoline you could wear on your feet. Kids strapped them on and bounced across driveways, pretending they were astronauts. It was exciting, wild, and completely unpredictable. Friends would challenge each other to jump higher or run while wearing them, often ending in spectacular wipeouts. The sound of laughter mixed with the inevitable thud of someone hitting the ground was part of every moon shoe memory. Despite the danger, the feeling of defying gravity, even for a few seconds, was too tempting to resist. The rubber bands that provided the spring were unstable, snapping or slipping without warning. One wrong jump, and you were face first on the pavement. Sprained ankles, twisted knees, and a few broken noses were common battle scars. But that did not stop kids from begging for a pair every Christmas. The commercials made them look effortless, like floating on the moon, but in reality, it was like strapping chaos to your feet. The 1980s loved risk, and moon shoes captured that spirit perfectly. Part science fiction, part disaster waiting to happen. Walking through hallways in the 1970s was an exercise in enforced silence. Many schools imposed what they called silence lines, strict no-talking zones between classes. Students were expected to move from one room to another without a word, as though conversation itself disrupted the order of the day. Teachers stood at the ends of corridors, watching for whispers, laughter, or any sound that broke the rule. Violators faced detention, extra homework, or even public scolding. The reasoning behind it was control. Quiet meant discipline, and discipline meant respect. But what it really bred was tension. Children learned to fear the sound of their own voices, to associate talking with trouble. It was especially harsh for younger students who naturally wanted to share excitement or confusion between lessons. The echoes of footsteps in those empty halls carried a strange loneliness. Looking back, it is hard not to see the irony, a place built for learning that punished curiosity and connection. The silence lines reflected a belief that order mattered more than humanity, that compliance was the highest virtue a student could have. Those narrow corridors became small, rigid reminders of a bigger idea. Schools were not just teaching facts, they were training obedience. Bare metal playground slides without coatings were once a familiar part of childhood, rising tall and gleaming under the summer sun. Grandparents remember them fondly, climbing the ladder with excitement before racing down at full speed. But these slides had a hidden danger that only revealed itself on hot days. Metal absorbs heat quickly, and by midday the surface could become scorching to the touch. Children sat down expecting fun, and instead burned the backs of their legs, screaming as they slid downward on what felt like a metal griddle. Some kids suffered blisters, and many avoided playgrounds during the hottest months, even though nobody understood the real cause at the time. Falls were common too, since the metal became slick with morning dew or rain. Regulators later required coated surfaces to prevent burns and injuries. Today, these slides are remembered with a mix of nostalgia and disbelief at how dangerous they truly were. Asbestos oven mitts and ironing board covers were once the gold standard of fire safety in the home, proudly advertised as the toughest, most heat-proof materials you could possibly buy. Your grandparents trusted them without hesitation, slipping their hands into those thick mitts and leaning over hot pans without a single worry in the world. Stores marketed asbestos like a miracle material, something so advanced and reliable that every home needed it. But every squeeze, every fold, and every scrape released microscopic fibers that floated into the air like invisible dust. These fibers did not break down, did not wash away, and did not leave your lungs once you inhaled them. By the time scientists uncovered the truth, asbestos had already found its way into ironing boards, mitts, pot holders, and countless other household items. Families were shocked to learn that the thing protecting their hands from burns was quietly harming them in a far more permanent way. Those mitts tell a story of trust, convenience, and a danger nobody saw coming. There was a time when buying imported cheese felt like sophistication itself. In the 1970s, raw milk cheeses, creamy, tangy, and full of character, became the mark of a true gourmet. They were made by hand, aged in cool cellars, and packed with rich, earthy flavor that pasteurized versions could never match. But the same bacteria that gave them depth also brought danger. Listeria, Salmonella, and E. coli lurked in the unpasteurized milk, invisible threats wrapped in golden wax. The Food and Drug Administration drew a line. Any cheese made from raw milk must be aged at least 60 days before sale to allow harmful bacteria to die off. That single rule shut the door on countless beloved imports. Cheeses from France, Italy, and Switzerland vanished from American markets, replaced by safer, blander versions. For many, it felt like losing a link to old-world culture, a trade of flavor for security. Even today, food lovers debate the rule, whether it protects us or just keeps us from tasting something truly real. But for those who remember that first bite of brie so soft it nearly melted on the tongue, the ban marked more than a change in law. It marked the end of an era when danger could still taste divine. Cottage cheese with rennet from calf stomach was once a wholesome staple that carried a darker story. Back in the 1950s, no one questioned where their food came from or what went into it. The process sounded simple enough: Curdle milk, strain it, and add rennet to thicken the texture. But rennet wasn't just an ingredient. It came from the inner lining of a young calf's stomach, an enzyme extracted during slaughter. To most consumers, it was invisible, an unseen part of the dairy world. For decades, people spooned cottage cheese onto fruit, salads, and toast without realizing the cost behind its creamy texture. When animal rights movements gained traction in the 1970s, rennet production came under fire. It wasn't just the ethics, it was also the contamination risks. Using animal tissue carried the danger of bacteria and disease, especially before stricter processing standards existed. Eventually, scientists developed microbial and plant-based alternatives, and the old method faded quietly into history. Modern cottage cheese tastes the same, but it no longer carries that hidden story of sacrifice. For anyone who remembers the real thing, there's a bittersweet truth in knowing that the innocent foods of the past were often anything but. Children participating in live nativity scenes with real animals was a cherished holiday experience in the 1970s. Schools and churches would gather goats, donkeys, sheep, or even small calves, placing them in straw-lined corners while children in robes acted out the story of the nativity. The animals brayed, shifted, or occasionally caused chaos, but everyone loved it. There was something magical about sharing the stage with creatures that felt straight out of the story itself. Children learned gentleness and patience in ways no classroom lesson could teach, and the unpredictability of the animals made every performance feel alive. Parents watched proudly, cameras in hand, capturing moments that felt sacred in their simplicity. But today, safety and liability laws make this nearly impossible. Real animals require permits, supervision, insurance, and strict handling rules. Most places do not attempt it anymore. The warmth of those live scenes has been replaced by cardboard props or digital projections. Yet anyone old enough to remember those nights can still smell the hay and hear the soft bleats that completed the scene. Spray-on flocking with chlorinated solvents was the secret weapon for families who wanted their Christmas trees to look freshly dusted with mountain snow. In the 1980s, parents would shake aerosol cans and coat branches, windowsills, and wreaths with white foam that dried into that perfect powdery finish. The smell was sharp and chemical, filling rooms with fumes that lingered long after decorating was done. But nobody thought twice about breathing it in. Kids watched in awe as parents transformed greenery into frosted masterpieces, sometimes helping to spray corners their parents could not reach. The chlorinated solvents inside those cans were powerful enough to simulate snow perfectly, but they also released volatile compounds that accumulated in enclosed spaces throughout the holiday season. Families sat in living rooms surrounded by freshly flocked decorations, inhaling chemicals no one imagined could cause respiratory harm. When scientists connected indoor air quality problems to these sprays, manufacturers were forced to reformulate or discontinue. The ease of creating instant winter magic came with a price nobody saw until damage was done. Bright red candies, fruit punch, and even cake frosting glowed with it. Kids in the 1950s could spot it from across the store, the promise of something sweet and happy. No one questioned what made those reds so vivid, because back then, if it looked exciting, it had to be safe. Or so everyone thought. The dye gave cherry sodas their pop, lollipops their shine, and even some cereals their charm. But years later, scientists studying lab rats found a darker story. Red dye number 2 was linked to cancer. Suddenly, that harmless glow felt like a warning light. Parents panicked, companies reformulated, and shelves changed overnight. For many, it was the first time America realized that progress could have a price. The same foods that had made childhood magical had quietly carried a risk no one could see. Red dye number 2 became a symbol of innocence lost, a color too dangerous to keep. Community bonfires using unregulated materials were another festive tradition that belonged to a different world entirely. You would see families tossing in scraps of old fencing, broken furniture, untreated wood, and sometimes even boxes or paper left over from the holiday madness. The bonfire would roar to life, sending sparks spiraling into the winter air like fireflies trying to escape the heat. People gathered around with warm drinks, shared stories, and treated it as a way to come together when the weather tried to push everyone apart. Nobody checked whether the materials were safe to burn. Nobody asked about air quality. It was simply a tradition born from practicality and a desire to be together. Today, though, burning anything other than clean, approved wood is illegal. Environmental regulations forbid the release of toxic fumes, and burning household materials can result in fines or even legal action. It is a reminder that the world has grown more cautious and more regulated. But the memory of standing around a roaring fire, bundled up and laughing with neighbors, is something no law can erase. There was a time when everyone carried Certs mints in their pockets, little silver rolls promising 2 mints in 1. What made them special was the ingredient called retsin, a shiny green fleck that was advertised as a miracle compound for fresh breath. It was supposed to neutralize odors better than anything else on the market. People believed in it like magic, tiny specks of freshness that could erase the smell of coffee or a nervous lunch before a date. It was small but mighty, a sign that you cared about how you presented yourself to the world. Even the way the foil unwrapped had a familiar sound, like the opening note of confidence itself. For decades, Certs were part of American life, sold at gas stations, kept in car consoles, shared before job interviews or first dates. But when the Food and Drug Administration re-examined retsin, it found that the blend of copper gluconate and hydrogenated oil was not as safe or effective as claimed. The ruling forced the end of production, and one of America's simplest pleasures disappeared overnight. Today, the word Certs barely rings a bell, but for many, that minty crunch lives on in memory. It was never just about breath. It was about confidence, a tiny piece of everyday ritual that quietly vanished from the grocery aisle. Arsenic-treated wood for fences and decks was once considered the smartest choice for any outdoor project, promising durability and resistance to rot. Termites and weathering grandparents used it to build backyard fences, raised garden beds, picnic tables, and decks meant to last for decades. To families at the time, this wood felt strong, dependable, and far superior to untreated lumber that softened or rotted too quickly. Homeowners took pride in these projects, believing they were investing in something long-lasting and practical. But the protection came from chromated copper arsenate, a preservative that contained real arsenic. As the wood aged, small flakes and dust particles washed into soil, onto hands, and even into household pets who wandered through the yard. Long-term exposure to the chemical was later linked to multiple health risks, including cancer and skin damage. When researchers connected these dangers to common household use, regulators swiftly banned arsenic-treated wood for residential projects. Many families who had spent weekends building fences were shocked to learn the material they used carried risks far beyond simple splinters. Over time, safer alternatives replaced the older wood, but the memory of those green-tinted boards still raises questions about how many people unknowingly worked with toxic materials. Today, they remind us that convenience can sometimes hide contamination in places we least expect. Cafeterias in the 1970s had their own set of unspoken laws, and one of the worst was the clean plate rule. Children were told they could not leave the lunch table until every bite was gone. It did not matter if the food was cold, mushy, or nauseating. Wasting food was a sin, teachers said, especially when kids in other countries are starving. Supervisors patrolled the aisles, watching trays closely, and those who hesitated were scolded. Kids learned tricks, spreading food thinly to make it look eaten, hiding vegetables under napkins, or trading unwanted bites to friends who were hungrier or braver. The cafeteria became a quiet battlefield between appetite and authority, and everyone had their own small rebellion. Years later, many adults realized they still cleaned their plates out of habit, not hunger, a lesson they never asked to learn. Some kids tried hiding peas under napkins or sneaking food into milk cartons, but they usually got caught. The rule was meant to teach gratitude, but it often taught disgust. Many children developed unhealthy relationships with food, learning to eat even when full or to associate meals with pressure and guilt. For a generation, the school lunchroom was not just noisy and chaotic. It was a small theater of forced obedience. Today, the idea of punishing a child for refusing to eat would be unthinkable. But back then, finishing your plate was not just expected, it was mandatory. The toy chemistry sets of the 1980s were not the watered-down, safe versions you see today. Back then, they were miniature laboratories filled with real acids, flammable powders, and unmarked mystery chemicals. For a generation raised on curiosity and chaos, they were irresistible. Kitchens turned into science labs and basements filled with smoke as kids tested experiments that often went wrong. Parents discovered scorched countertops, blackened test tubes, and half-melted spoons left behind in the name of science. Some kids proudly created small explosions, convinced they were future geniuses, while their mothers screamed from upstairs to stop making that smell. Kids mixed, boiled, and ignited all sorts of concoctions, often inside their bedrooms. Instructions encouraged experimentation, sometimes even hinting at reactions that produced fire or smoke. The danger was part of the appeal. There were countless reports of burns, ruined carpets, and explosions that sent families running for the garden hose. Yet these kits also inspired many future scientists who credit those reckless experiments for sparking their curiosity. Eventually, regulations forced toy makers to strip the sets of anything remotely hazardous, turning them into safe but boring science light boxes. The old chemistry sets may have been risky, but for the daring kids of the 1980s, they were proof that discovery often came with a little danger and a lot of smoke. Lead-soldered stained glass tree toppers crowned Christmas trees in the 1980s with handcrafted elegance that mass-produced plastic stars could never match. Families treasured these delicate pieces, often receiving them as wedding gifts or inheriting them from grandparents who valued artisan craftsmanship. The colored glass caught tree lights beautifully, casting rainbow patterns across ceilings and walls while everyone gathered below to exchange presents. What made these toppers so structurally sound was the lead solder holding each piece of glass together, applied by craftspeople who worked without gloves or ventilation. Every time someone placed the topper on the tree, adjusted its position, or packed it away, tiny particles of lead transferred onto hands that later touched faces and food. Children lifted onto shoulders to place the star were exposed directly, their small fingers gripping the metal seams without anyone imagining the danger. When health authorities documented lead's devastating effects on developing brains, these handcrafted treasures became hazardous heirlooms. The artistry that once elevated holiday decorating now carries warnings about handling and display. Leaving wrapped gifts under the tree in public spaces was one of those whimsical little touches that made the holidays in the 1970s feel magical. You would walk into a library, a bank lobby, a school hallway, or even a town hall, and there would be a fully decorated Christmas tree surrounded by beautifully wrapped presents. Most of them were empty boxes, of course, but nobody cared. The point was the feeling, the sense that the whole community was celebrating together. Children loved pressing their faces close to the boughs and shiny paper, imagining what might be inside. Adults enjoyed the display as a symbol of generosity and shared holiday cheer. Nobody thought about theft or tampering or anything sinister. It was just part of December, as natural as wreaths on doors and lights in windows. Today, though, a wrapped box sitting unattended in a public place is treated as a suspicious package. Security protocols kick in fast, and entire buildings can be evacuated over something that used to be nothing more than festive decoration. Anti-theft policies, liability concerns, and modern fears have erased that simple tradition. But for anyone who lived through it, the memory of seeing those pretty boxes waiting under a glowing tree still feels like stepping into a storybook, one where wonder mattered more than worry. Glass baby bottles with lead paint designs were once a symbol of love and care. Parents in the 1950s adored them, decorated with cheerful ducks, rabbits, and pastel-colored animals. They were gifts for baby showers, proudly displayed in kitchen cabinets, tiny keepsakes of innocence. It was the height of the post-war baby boom, and the market was flooded with products that blended charm with modern design. Mothers trusted anything that looked sanitary and cute, assuming regulators had already done the worrying for them. But in truth, safety testing barely existed. Style mattered more than science. The paint used for decoration contained lead, a neurotoxin that accumulates in growing children and causes irreversible brain damage. No one imagined those smiling cartoon faces could poison their babies. For years, infants drank warm milk from bottles that looked wholesome but were dangerously contaminated. By the time regulators banned lead paint, the damage had already reached countless households. Modern parents might shudder at the thought, but those pastel bottles still turn up in antique stores, a haunting reminder that even the cutest products can hide something cruel. Beauty, it turns out, should never come before safety. Crystal Pepsi was the drink that tried to reinvent soda and accidentally confused everyone. In the early 1990s, Pepsi wanted to symbolize purity and transparency, so they made a cola with no color at all. It looked like sparkling water but tasted like Pepsi, and that contradiction fascinated people. People stared at it on shelves, unsure if it was a prank or a promise, and yet curiosity always won. For a brief moment, it felt like drinking the future, a crystal-clear revolution in a brown-colored world. Even opening the bottle had a sense of wonder, like unveiling a secret that was hiding in plain sight. For a short while, it became a phenomenon. Commercials promised a clean, futuristic world in a clear bottle. But the illusion shattered quickly. Many consumers thought it was diet soda, while others complained that it tasted off, even though the formula was almost identical. Mislabeling, marketing confusion, and failed freshness tests in certain regions sealed its fate. It vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Still, for those who remember it, Crystal Pepsi was unforgettable, not for its flavor, but for its ambition. It was a reminder that sometimes, when you try too hard to make something clear, you end up losing what made it real. Bare bulb heat lamps for bathrooms were once seen as a luxurious upgrade, offering instant warmth during cold mornings when stepping out of the shower felt unbearable. Grandparents installed them proudly, believing these lamps were both comforting and practical, especially in older homes without central heating. The bright red bulbs glowed intensely, filling the bathroom with a warmth that felt almost spa-like. People trusted them completely, flicking the switch every morning without considering any risk beyond the heat itself. But bare bulbs are fragile, and these lamps were often placed dangerously close to moisture. If water splashed onto the hot surface, the bulb could shatter violently, sending glass shards across the bathroom. Worse, the exposed wiring and intense heat created real fire hazards in rooms filled with towels, curtains, and wooden cabinets. When safety investigators documented the number of injuries and home fires, regulators banned these lamps and required protective coverings for any bathroom heating fixtures. Families who once saw these bulbs as a luxury suddenly realized how hazardous they truly were. Today, modern heating systems and safer bulb designs have replaced those old fixtures. But the memory of that glowing red light still lingers in many households. It is unsettling to think that something meant to bring comfort carried such unpredictable risks behind its warm glow. Disrespecting a teacher in the 1970s was one of the gravest offenses, and disrespect could mean almost anything. Rolling your eyes, sighing, or even questioning an instruction was considered insubordination. Some students were immediately suspended or expelled on the spot. Principals supported their staff without question, and parents often sided with the school, assuming the teacher was right. It was an era when adults ruled without challenge. Children's voices held little weight, even when they were punished unfairly. Some kids learned to mask every reaction, forcing themselves to nod and smile even when they disagreed. Others stopped participating altogether, afraid that curiosity might be mistaken for defiance. The silence that filled classrooms was not respect, it was survival. The system valued obedience above fairness, and once labeled disrespectful, a student's record could follow them for years. For many, it was the end of trust in authority. The lesson was not about manners or self-control, it was about silence. The smallest act of independence could end a future, and that reality shaped how an entire generation learned to swallow their opinions. Today, that kind of blind punishment feels extreme, but back then, it was the rule of the classroom. Creepy crawlers. Thingmaker sets gave kids the thrill of feeling like real inventors, or maybe mad scientists. The concept was simple. Pour liquid plastic into metal molds, heat it up, and watch colorful bugs and creatures take shape. The problem? The molds were scorching hot, and the liquid plastic reached dangerously high temperatures. The entire set came with little safety beyond parental supervision and a brave spirit. Many kids ended up with minor burns, and a few had far worse injuries. Still, that smell of melted plastic and the thrill of pulling a perfect worm from the mold was unforgettable. Parents called it creativity. Safety officials called it negligence. Eventually, the manufacturer redesigned the toy with safer heating systems, but by then, the original had already earned its place as a legend among risky 1980s crafts. Looking back, it is shocking that anyone thought a 400-degree mold belonged in a child's bedroom. But then again, that was part of the charm of growing up in an era where danger and imagination were inseparable. Lead-painted ceramic Christmas villages were treasured centerpieces in countless 1980s homes, their detailed houses and shops glowing warmly beneath strings of miniature lights. Families collected pieces year after year, building elaborate winter scenes on mantels and display tables that became the heart of holiday decorating. Children loved examining the tiny windows, doors, and figurines, often picking up pieces to look at the intricate details painted with bright, glossy colors. Those vibrant reds, greens, and yellows came from glazes that contained lead, a detail no manufacturer felt compelled to disclose. Every time someone dusted the village, rearranged buildings, or touched the smooth ceramic surfaces, microscopic lead particles transferred onto fingers that later touched faces and food. Parents encouraged children to help set up the display, never suspecting the family tradition was quietly exposing everyone to a dangerous heavy metal. When testing revealed how much lead these decorations contained, regulators demanded changes that ended production of the original formulas. Those cherished villages now carry warnings that transform nostalgia into unease. Town parades throwing unwrapped candy at crowds was one of the purest delights of Christmas in the 1970s. Parade floats would inch slowly down the street while performers and volunteers tossed handfuls of brightly colored treats into cheering crowds. Children scrambled joyfully to pick them up, stuffing pockets and mittens with their sugary loot. There was always a burst of laughter when a piece bounced off a boot or skidded across the pavement like a tiny comet. No one cared that the candy was unwrapped. It was part of the thrill. And parents loved watching their kids dive after sweets like treasure hunters on a winter adventure. Nobody worried about wrappers, allergies, or sanitation. It was just part of the fun, a tiny burst of excitement in the middle of winter. Today, though, this practice is banned almost everywhere. Injury risks, food safety rules, and liability concerns have shut it down. Wrapped candy is allowed in some places, but even that comes with restrictions. Still, the memory of a flying piece of candy arcing through the cold air is something many people hold close. Butter-flavored margarine was a 1950s wonder, spreadable, cheap, and promoted as a heart-healthy alternative to butter. Housewives embraced it as the modern choice, the sign of progress in every kitchen. Its golden color and smooth texture promised indulgence without guilt. It was advertised in bright magazines beside smiling families and spotless kitchens, the perfect picture of American prosperity. Scientists and companies alike told the public it was the smarter fat, a scientific marvel that separated them from the old-fashioned ways of their parents. But science back then cared more about selling innovation than testing its safety. The secret behind its miracle formula was trans fats, the industrial oils hydrogenated to stay solid at room temperature. For decades, Americans slathered their toast and fried their eggs in it, believing they were doing their hearts a favor. Then the studies came, and the truth was hard to swallow. Trans fats were worse than the butter they replaced, clogging arteries and shortening lives. By the time it was banned, it had already shaped the diet of a generation. Butter-flavored margarine was more than a product. It was a lie sold with a smile. The early 2000s gave us something truly wild, Original Four Loko. It was the drink that seemed like it broke every rule in the book. Half energy drink, half malt liquor, it was nicknamed Blackout in a Can for a reason. College parties, music festivals, and weekend get-togethers suddenly had a new mascot. Bright colors, loud designs, and an even louder buzz. People loved it because it made them feel invincible, awake enough to party all night, and numb enough to forget how much they drank. There was danger in every sip, but that danger was the appeal. The spark that turned an ordinary night into a story you could barely remember. The caffeine kept you awake while the alcohol made sure you forgot what happened next. Hospitals started seeing spikes in alcohol poisoning, and lawmakers took notice. By the end of 2010, the government banned its original formula nationwide. The drink was reformulated without caffeine, but the legend of Four Loko was already sealed in pop culture. For many, it represented a time when excess was celebrated, when danger itself was part of the thrill. Today, people look back on it with a mix of disbelief and nostalgia, because nothing says youth like drinking something that probably should have been illegal from the start. Old formula mothballs with naphthalene were once a staple in every storage chest, attic box, and seasonal clothing bin, used by grandparents who swore by their ability to protect garments from moths. These little white spheres had a pungent smell that filled entire closets, drifting into hallways and drawers with an intensity no one questioned. Back then, people saw mothballs as a simple necessity, something you tolerated for the sake of saving your favorite wool coat or treasured blanket. They were tossed into trunks, packed with winter clothes, and placed in basements year after year. But naphthalene fumes did not just repel insects. They built up in the air and entered the lungs of anyone living near them, especially children and pets. Over time, researchers linked naphthalene exposure to anemia, liver damage, and respiratory illness, revealing dangers no one had imagined. Grandparents who thought they were preserving their belongings were unknowingly exposing themselves to toxic vapors floating through their own homes. As the health risks became widely recognized, regulators banned the naphthalene versions and replaced them with safer formulations. Many families were shocked to learn the truth about something they had used for so many years without hesitation. Even today, the sharp smell of old mothballs can bring back memories, but it also carries a reminder that not every household tradition stands the test of time. These tiny spheres left behind a long legacy of both protection and unintended harm. Gym class in the 1970s was not just about push-ups or running laps. It was about public humiliation disguised as fitness. Students lined up in front of their classmates to be weighed, their numbers recorded out loud by teachers holding clipboards. The scale sat in the corner of every gym like a silent judge, and no one could escape its verdict. Fitness progress was what they called it, but it was really a ritual of comparison. Kids whispered, laughed, or cringed as each name was called. No one questioned why it mattered how much a child weighed, only that lighter meant better. For many, this was their first lesson in body shame, long before social media ever existed. Teachers claimed it built discipline, but it mostly built anxiety, especially for those who already felt different. Students still remember the metallic click of that scale, the scratch of pen against paper, and the eyes that followed them back to the bench. In a place meant to build confidence, self-worth was measured in pounds. Looking back, it is easy to see how cruel those moments really were. Pogo balls were the natural next step in the 1980s bounce craze. A rubber disc with a ball in the center, it required balance, coordination, and a healthy disregard for gravity. Kids gripped it with their shoes and jumped until they inevitably fell. Neighborhoods turned into outdoor arenas with kids daring each other to see who could bounce the longest or the highest. The pogo ball squeaked loudly with every jump, creating a rhythm that could be heard down the block. Eventually, that sound meant one of two things: someone was having the time of their life, or someone was about to crash. When it worked, it felt like flying. When it did not, it was an instant faceplant. The grip tore easily, sending kids sprawling onto concrete or grass. Broken wrists, scraped knees, and bruised chins became badges of honor. Schools banned them after too many recess injuries, but that only made them more appealing. Like so many toys of the decade, the pogo ball blurred the line between fun and danger. Looking back, it is amazing anyone survived childhood intact, and even more amazing that we still look back on it all with a smile. Mercury glass ornament garlands were prized possessions in 1980s households, their antique silver finish lending elegance that modern ornaments could not match. Families inherited them from grandparents or discovered them in specialty shops, stringing the delicate spheres across mantels and tree branches where they caught light with an almost liquid shimmer. The vintage look was achieved through double-walled glass with a reflective coating sealed inside, creating that distinctive mirror-like glow that made everything sparkle. What most families never knew was that older versions contained actual mercury compounds in their reflective coating. If an ornament cracked, chipped, or shattered, the toxic metal could escape into the air or onto surfaces where children played. People handled these ornaments carefully because they were fragile, never realizing gentleness was also a matter of safety. When environmental regulations tightened around mercury products, these garlands became prohibited items that families were urged to dispose of through hazardous waste programs. The elegant shimmer that elevated holiday decor now represents a generation's unknowing exposure. Driving home. Christmas trees on car roofs without tying them properly was almost a holiday sport in the 1970s. Families would buy a tree that was always 2 feet taller than the living room allowed, hoist it onto the roof by sheer force of will, and toss 1 or 2 loops of twine over it with a confidence that probably came from nowhere rational. The wind would whip through the branches as the car pulled onto the road, and everyone inside held their breath just a little, watching for any sudden wobble. Nobody thought about fines or traffic violations or the possibility of the tree tumbling dramatically into the street. It was just part of the adventure, part of the ritual of getting that perfect pine safely home. Today, though, even slightly unsecured loads can earn you a ticket on the spot. Highways and city streets have become strict zones of compliance, leaving no room for the messy charm of trial and error. But the memory of those rides home, filled with laughter and the smell of fresh pine creeping into the car, remains untouchable. Brominated vegetable oil, or BVO, was the secret ingredient that made 1950s fruit sodas look and taste so good. It kept the citrus flavor evenly mixed, preventing that oily layer from rising to the top. The chemistry was clever, the flavor refreshing, and the bright bottles flew off the shelves. For decades, no one questioned what brominated meant. It just sounded scientific, and science meant progress. But studies later revealed the truth. Bromine compounds did not just disappear. They built up in human tissue, especially fat, leading to headaches, memory loss, and nerve issues. It was found in everything from orange soda to sports drinks, hiding behind harmless-sounding labels. Teenagers drank it daily without a clue that it shared a chemical base with flame retardants. When that fact hit the headlines, even the most loyal soda drinkers turned queasy. The same chemical family used in flame retardants was floating in your orange soda. When the public finally learned, it was too late for many. BVO had been in use for over 30 years. The Food and Drug Administration eventually banned it, leaving soda makers scrambling for safer replacements. Still, those who grew up in that era can probably remember the taste: sweet, fizzy, and unknowingly toxic. Ecto Cooler. Hi-C was pure childhood magic poured into a box. Inspired by the Ghostbusters craze of the 80s, it glowed with a radioactive green that no fruit on Earth had ever seen. It tasted like tangerine mixed with nostalgia and a hint of Saturday morning cartoons. Every kid in America wanted it in their lunchbox, and every parent knew exactly what that neon color meant: artificial dyes and plenty of sugar. It stained your tongue, your clothes, and sometimes even the kitchen counter, but no one cared. Kids sipped it like it was a secret potion, their own piece of Ghostbusters magic in liquid form. Years later, when regulations began restricting synthetic food colorings linked to hyperactivity and health concerns, the drink quietly disappeared. but it left behind a generation of kids who still swear it tasted better than anything since. For many, it was not just juice. It was a piece of their childhood, a reminder of how fun could come in the strangest colors. Even now, when someone finds an old box online or a commemorative re-release, it feels like opening a time capsule from a brighter, weirder world where even your drink looked like slime. Lead crystal drinkware was the pride of many grandparents' dining rooms, displayed behind glass cabinets like sparkling treasures reserved for holidays and special guests. These glasses caught the light beautifully, chimed with an elegant ring, and made any family gathering feel just a little fancier. People assumed that something so beautiful, so refined, must also be harmless. But lead does not stay locked inside crystal. It slowly dissolves into whatever it touches, especially acidic drinks like wine or fruit juice. Over time, researchers discovered how toxic lead exposure truly was, especially for children, and suddenly those elegant glasses did not seem so harmless anymore. The bans followed as new safety standards forced companies to retire lead from anything intended for drinking or eating. Today, those glasses sit mostly unused, reminders of an era when beauty and danger sometimes shared the same shine. Public punishment in classrooms was another normal part of 1970s schooling, and nothing symbolized that better than the dunce chair. If you were caught daydreaming, laughing too loud, or falling behind, you could be made to sit at the front of the class facing the wall while everyone else stared. Sometimes teachers made kids wear a paper hat or hold a sign that said slow or lazy. Humiliation was a teaching tool, and students were told it would make them stronger. But the truth was, it made children terrified of making mistakes. Many adults still feel that pang of shame when they think about being singled out for something as small as a spelling error. The dunce chair was less about correction and more about control, a way to remind everyone watching what happens if you step out of line. Today, that kind of cruelty would never pass as education. Clackers were one of those toys that seemed harmless until you actually used them. Two acrylic balls were attached to strings, and the goal was to swing them up and down in rhythm so they smacked together with a loud clack. Kids loved the sound and the challenge, spending hours perfecting the timing. Sometimes they would form small groups on driveways or at recess, each trying to master double or triple clacks while the others watched in awe. The plastic would heat from friction, adding an odd smell and a bit of smoke to the mix. But no one cared. It felt like an accomplishment. Even when their hands were sore and their wrists bruised, they kept going, determined to get that perfect sound. But anyone who owned a set knows what came next. Those plastic balls were made of hard, brittle material that could shatter under pressure. When they did, the pieces flew fast and sharp, right into faces, eyes, or walls. Parents tried to tape them up or replace them, but the danger was baked into the design. Eventually, schools and parents' groups began pushing for bans after a wave of injuries swept the country. Still, for many who grew up then, that loud rhythmic clicking brings back memories of hot summer afternoons and bruised knuckles. They were flashy, fun, and far too dangerous to survive the modern world. Electric candle lights without thermal cutoffs sat proudly in windows throughout the 1980s, their warm glow signaling holiday cheer to every neighbor passing by. Families placed them on sills, plugged them in, and left them burning for hours, sometimes days, without considering the heat building inside plastic bases. The soft, flickering light looked peaceful and traditional, so nobody imagined these simple decorations could pose any real threat. But early electric candles lacked the automatic shutoff features that modern versions include as standard safety measures. The bulbs inside grew dangerously hot over time, and plastic housings were never designed to withstand sustained heat exposure. Curtains brushed against warm bases, wooden sills absorbed rising temperatures, and transformers worked overtime without any mechanism to interrupt the current. Fires started in homes where families assumed the candles were safe, often while everyone slept believing the glow was harmless. When fire investigators traced blazes back to these unregulated candles, mandatory safety standards finally arrived. The cozy window tradition came with risks families only understood after tragedy struck. Driving around to look at Christmas lights without seatbelts was one of those little joys that defined December nights in the 1970s. Families would load into the car after dinner, kids piling into laps or lying across the back seat while the heater hummed and the windows fogged just enough to need a little swipe with a sleeve. No one thought about rules or risks. It was about being together in that warm, rolling bubble, pointing out the biggest displays, the brightest reindeer, the houses where every inch twinkled like stars. Parents drove slowly, sometimes leaning out the window with one arm, sometimes steering with a confidence that only came from doing this every year of their lives. Today, though, not wearing a seatbelt is enough to get you pulled over before you reach the end of your street. Child safety laws turned what once felt natural into something unthinkable. But if you grew up in that era, you can still feel the vinyl seats beneath your hands, still hear your siblings shouting, still remember how safe it all felt before the world decided otherwise. Lead-soldered cans were once the height of convenience, sitting proudly on pantry shelves filled with soups, beans, and vegetables. Housewives in the 1950s relied on them for quick dinners, trusting the gleam of the metal and the weight of the can. No one knew that each meal came with a hidden dose of poison. The solder that sealed those cans was made from lead, a heavy metal that slowly seeped into whatever food it touched. Over time, families unknowingly ingested trace amounts that built up in their bodies. Children suffered the most: fatigue, headaches, and developmental issues doctors struggled to explain. It took years of investigation before the truth surfaced. These ordinary cans were silently toxic. Once the government finally stepped in, the change was swift and absolute. Modern cans switched to safer materials, but the memory lingered. An entire generation raised on food that was convenient, cheap, and quietly dangerous. Long before energy drinks became common, Jolt Cola was already rewriting the rules of caffeine. Its slogan said it all the sugar and twice the caffeine. In the 80s, that made it the ultimate rebel's drink. It was for gamers, coders, students pulling all-nighters, and anyone who wanted to feel like they were living on the edge of exhaustion. It tasted like liquid chaos, sweet enough to jolt you awake and strong enough to make your hands tremble after a few cans. Parents hated it, which only made it more appealing. For teenagers, drinking Jolt was not about taste. It was about rebellion. Supermarkets stacked cases of it, and teenagers wore their Jolt pride like a badge of honor. But as caffeine limits tightened and parents grew concerned about hyperactive kids bouncing off the walls, the drink became a symbol of excess. Regulators started cracking down, and Jolt slowly disappeared from the mainstream. It did not vanish with a bang. It just fizzled away like the last sip of a flat cola. Still, those who remember that metallic sweetness and electric buzz can tell you, it was more than a drink. It was pure adrenaline in a can, and once you tried it, nothing else quite hit the same. Carbon tetrachloride fire extinguishers were once seen as the future of household safety, a sleek and modern solution to kitchen flare-ups and small electrical fires. Grandparents kept them under sinks, in garages, and near stoves, believing they were armed with the best protection money could buy. When flames appeared, people were told to spray this magical liquid right onto the fire, watching it smother flames in seconds. But nobody knew what happened when that liquid touched heat. It released vapors that could stop lungs from breathing and turn a simple fire into a deadly cloud. Families who rushed to put out fires ended up inhaling something far more dangerous than the flames themselves, unaware that each breath carried a hidden risk. Today, it is terrifying to think how many families stood inches away from a toxic haze without understanding the danger. Those extinguishers remain one of the most unsettling reminders that sometimes the things meant to save us carry their own kind of threat, one hidden behind promises of safety and progress. The Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kids doll was designed to be cute, interactive, and surprisingly hungry. Kids could feed it pretend snacks that disappeared into its mechanical mouth as the doll chewed with a quiet whirring sound. At first, it felt like magic, a toy that could eat on its own. But that magic quickly turned into horror for many children. The doll's motorized mouth had no off switch, and it did not know the difference between plastic food and real fingers. Countless kids learned that the hard way, getting their hair or fingertips caught in the doll's relentless jaws. Parents rushed to pull the batteries, but even that sometimes did not stop it. The manufacturer recalled the dolls after several injuries, but not before the snack time kids had earned a spot in toy history for all the wrong reasons. Despite its creepy legacy, some collectors still keep them. A strange reminder of how wild 1980s toy innovation could be. The idea of a doll that eats might sound innocent, but when it starts chewing on you, the fun ends fast. Cadmium red painted wooden ornaments hung from Christmas trees across the country in the 1980s, their bright crimson finish adding that perfect pop of traditional holiday color. Families loved how the rich red shades stood out against green branches, catching light in ways that made even simple wooden shapes look festive. Craft stores sold them by the dozen, and parents often let children help paint additional ornaments at home using similar commercial paints without checking labels. The vivid red pigment that made these ornaments so appealing came from cadmium, a toxic heavy metal that created colors more brilliant than safer alternatives could achieve. Every time someone handled the ornaments, adjusted their placement, or brushed against them while reaching for presents, tiny particles of cadmium paint transferred onto skin. Children who put ornaments in their mouths or touched them and then ate cookies absorbed the metal directly. When researchers documented cadmium's dangers, including kidney damage and bone weakening, regulators banned its use in consumer products. The cheerful red that once symbolized Christmas spirit became a cautionary tale about hidden ingredients. Using real candles in church pageants and school plays was one of the most beautiful and unnerving traditions of the 1970s. Children walked down aisles holding flickering flames while choirs sang softly, the warm glow reflecting off every wall and making the entire room feel holy and alive. Teachers handed out matches or lighters without hesitation, helping kids ignite candles they barely understood how to hold. There was a reverence in the room that even the adults could feel, a sense that the fire itself was part of the story. No one imagined disaster. They imagined tradition, history, and meaning. And for a few moments, every child felt trusted beyond their years. The scent of melted wax filled the air, becoming part of the memory itself. Today, though, open flames around children are banned in almost every school and most churches. Fire regulations leave no room for risk, even in the name of tradition. But anyone who stood there holding that tiny flame remembers how powerful it felt, how it transformed an ordinary evening into something unforgettable. Saccharin-sweetened soft drinks were the original promise of guilt-free pleasure. The 1950s called them miracle sodas, offering sweetness without sugar, calories, or consequence. Housewives stocked their fridges with shiny cans of Diet Cola, proud to serve something modern and figure-friendly. It seemed like a revolution, proof that science could outsmart nature. But by the late 1960s, lab tests told a different story. Rats given high doses of saccharin developed bladder cancer, and public trust shattered overnight. The reaction was immediate. Panicked consumers poured out bottles, and news anchors warned of poison in your pop. It became the first true food scare of the modern age, and every can of soda turned into a question of faith. People learned that even sweetness, when manufactured, could carry a sting. Though later research softened the panic, the damage was done. The first wave of diet drinks disappeared, leaving behind fear and confusion. People realized that artificial could mean dangerous, and zero-calorie might come with a hidden cost. Saccharin eventually returned under tight regulation, but it never regained the innocent glow it once had. What began as liberation through chemistry ended as a cautionary tale of too much faith in innovation. There was a time when ketchup came in colors you would never believe. Green Heinz EZ Squirt hit shelves in the early 2000s and turned every kid's meal into a wild art project. The company wanted to make eating fun again. Bright purple, blue, and green sauces that squirted out of rocket-shaped bottles. Parents bought them by the dozen, and kids painted their French fries and hot dogs like edible canvases. The ketchup splattered across plates and lunch tables, creating masterpieces no art class could ever allow. Children squealed with laughter, while parents wondered how they would ever clean it off. For a brief, chaotic moment, dinner felt like finger painting with food, but the colors came at a cost. Those neon hues were powered by synthetic dyes later linked to behavioral issues and health risks in children. When regulations tightened around artificial food colorings, Heinz quietly pulled the plug. The bottles vanished, leaving behind only memories of bright green burgers and blue spaghetti nights. It was a strange experiment in marketing, one that proved just how far people would go for a dash of novelty at the dinner table. Still, anyone who grew up with Easy Squirt remembers it fondly, because nothing tasted quite like ketchup that looked like slime. Lead soldered canned foods were once a staple in every pantry, stacked in neat rows that promised long shelf life and simple meal prep during busy times. Grandparents relied on them for soups, vegetables, fruit, and even meats, believing that canned goods were one of the safest and most dependable food sources available. Families opened these cans daily, pouring their contents into pots without ever questioning how the can itself might affect the food. But lead does not stay put when it touches acidic ingredients like tomatoes or fruit juice. It slowly leaches into the food, turning a pantry staple into a silent source of contamination. Doctors eventually traced cases of lead poisoning back to these soldered cans, and regulators moved to eliminate lead from all food packaging. Suddenly, a trusted convenience became a symbol of hidden danger, a reminder that even the simplest products can carry risks no one expects today. Modern cans use safe materials, but the memory of those older designs still raises eyebrows. Discipline in the 1970s often had a sense of irony, and nowhere was that clearer than in the cigarette detention swaps. Teachers were supposed to confiscate cigarettes from students caught smoking on school grounds, but many took the pack and kept it for themselves. Some even lit one right there, turning the punishment into a joke. Students laughed awkwardly, and the message was confusing. Smoking was wrong for kids, but apparently fine for the adults who enforced the rules. Teachers would sometimes share stories about their favorite brands or use cigarettes as a bonding gesture, as though it proved they were cool. This casual hypocrisy showed how blurred the moral boundaries were. Smoking was everywhere, in teacher lounges, hallways, and even classrooms. The health warnings that seem obvious now were barely discussed then. For students, the act of being caught felt less like discipline and more like initiation into adulthood. Watching your teacher take your cigarette and enjoy it sent a message louder than any lecture. It told you that authority could bend the rules whenever it wanted. Those moments taught cynicism early, long before students had words for it. Looking back, it feels absurd, even darkly comedic, that the people meant to enforce responsibility were often modeling the opposite. It was a different time, yes, but also a clear example of how the culture of the 1970s blurred right and wrong under the haze of cigarette smoke. Polly Pocket was every child's dream, a tiny world that fit right in the palm of your hand. Each compact case opened to reveal a miniature dollhouse or playland, filled with tiny furniture and even tinier dolls. It was charming, portable, and imaginative. But the small size that made Polly Pocket so special was also what made it dangerous. The miniature accessories were easy to lose, and even easier to swallow. Toddlers especially found the colorful pieces irresistible, leading to choking hazards and emergency room visits. Despite safety concerns, Polly Pocket became one of the most beloved toys of the late 1980s and early 1990s, its tiny charm impossible to resist. Manufacturers later redesigned the toy to make pieces larger and safer, but purists say it was never the same. For those who grew up with the original, Polly Pocket represented both the beauty and the peril of 1980s play, small, delicate, and just a little bit dangerous. Aluminum icicles with sharp, unfinished edges dangled from trees in the 1980s like frozen rain caught mid-fall, their metallic surfaces reflecting every color from surrounding lights. Families bought them in bulk, tossing handfuls onto branches until trees sparkled with that retro shimmer that felt quintessentially festive. Kids loved helping, grabbing fistfuls of thin metal strips and draping them anywhere they could reach. But these icicles were manufactured cheaply, stamped from aluminum sheets and packaged without any smoothing process. The edges remained razor-sharp, capable of slicing fingers with even gentle handling. Children often discovered this painfully, ending up with cuts that parents dismissed as minor holiday hazards. Beyond the cuts, these metal icicles conducted electricity if they fell across light strands or touched exposed wiring, creating shock risks nobody anticipated from simple decorations. When safety advocates documented injuries and electrical dangers, regulations required edge finishing or discontinuation. The sparkling icicles that once seemed like harmless festive additions became symbols of an era when safety standards lagged behind holiday enthusiasm. Churches and schools setting up high decorations without ladders or harnesses was one of those behind-the-scenes holiday traditions no one ever questioned in the 1970s. You would walk in one morning and see garlands, stars, wreaths, and giant paper bells hanging from rafters or high windows, and you never stopped to think about who climbed up there to put them in place. The truth was simple. Volunteers did everything by hand. Teachers balanced on chairs stacked on tables. Parents shimmied up bookshelves or window ledges. Church volunteers climbed onto pews and walked along beams like it was nothing more than part of the job. Nobody filled out paperwork. Nobody had safety training. Everyone just wanted the space to look beautiful for the season. Today, though, workplace and volunteer safety laws make these practices illegal. You need certified ladders, harnesses, supervision, and even insurance coverage depending on the height. Decorations that once appeared effortlessly now require full safety compliance. It keeps people protected, but it also reminds us how different the world used to be. There was a sense of community effort then, a shared willingness to do something a little risky just to make the holidays shine brighter, and you can still picture those halls and sanctuaries glowing with decorations that only pure determination could have placed so high. Cyclamate artificial sweetener was the dream of every dieter in the 1950s. It promised sweetness without sugar, indulgence without guilt. Early advertisements called it a scientific miracle, the modern answer to cravings. It found its way into sodas, desserts, and even chewing gum. People felt like they were living in the future, where chemistry could fix every flaw of human appetite. Cafes and soda fountains served slim milkshakes, and homemakers stocked their shelves with low-calorie cake mixes, thinking science had finally conquered temptation. But the sweetness came with a bitter aftertaste of trust misplaced. People loved it, especially diabetics who finally had a way to enjoy sweet things again. But by 1969, everything changed. Studies on lab rats linked cyclamate to cancer, and the Food and Drug Administration banned it almost overnight. For a product that had been called the future of flavor, it was a shocking end. The shelves emptied and the world went back to sugar, realizing that sometimes science can promise too much too soon. The ban became one of the earliest examples of America learning that not every innovation is safe, no matter how sweet it seems. Before there was a health craze about energy drinks, there were sodas laced with brominated vegetable oil, better known as BVO. Found in citrus favorites like Mountain Dew and Sun Drop, it was used to keep the flavor evenly mixed. For decades, nobody questioned it. Kids chugged neon green sodas at arcades, parents packed them into lunchboxes, and commercials promised unstoppable energy. It was the soda of summer vacations, backyard barbecues, and glowing green tongues. People had no idea that the same ingredient keeping the citrus oil afloat was slowly building up in their bodies over time. Then scientists revealed that bromine, one of the elements in BVO, could build up in the human body and cause serious health problems. Suddenly, the familiar fizz turned into fear. The Food and Drug Administration banned its use, forcing companies to change their recipes. But for people who grew up in the 80s and 90s, that old taste still lingers in memory. It was sharp, tangy, and just a bit radioactive in color, like drinking liquid lightning from a bottle. It was the flavor of youth, risk, and everything that felt a little too extreme for its own good. In the 1970s, candy was not just candy. It was curiosity, risk, and play. That is why a strange little product called Love Drops gum caused such a stir. Marketed as an aphrodisiac, it claimed to make you feel bold, confident, and maybe even romantic. Teenagers dared each other to try it, giggling in convenience store aisles as they handed over a few coins for a pack. The gum's packaging promised excitement, but no one really knew what was inside. That mystery was part of its allure. Later testing revealed that Love Drops contained unregulated herbal extracts and stimulants that acted like mild drugs. The Food and Drug Administration quickly stepped in, banning its sale nationwide. Parents were horrified, schools issued warnings, and the candy disappeared as suddenly as it arrived. But for those who remember the era, Love Drops was not just about the gum. It was about the spirit of experimentation that defined the 70s. A time when products flirted with the line between fun and forbidden. Looking back, it feels almost innocent compared to what followed, but it was the first sign that even in the candy aisle, the world was beginning to take pleasure and danger a lot more seriously. Household bug bombs with DDT were once considered the ultimate solution for any insect problem, filling homes with a haze of chemicals that promised to wipe out everything from roaches to ants. Grandparents shook the can, placed it in the center of a room, and pressed the button before leaving the house for hours. When they returned, they believed they were stepping into a cleaner, safer home, free from pests that threatened their food or comfort. Back then, DDT was widely trusted, seen as a scientific miracle that protected crops, homes, and even public spaces. But DDT does not simply evaporate after use. It lingers on surfaces, carpets, clothing, and even inside the human body. Accumulating with every new exposure, scientists later discovered that DDT disrupted hormones, damaged wildlife, and posed serious health risks to people of all ages. When the evidence became undeniable, regulators banned DDT nationwide, and the household bug bombs that contained it vanished from store shelves. Many families were shocked to learn that something they used regularly carried dangers far beyond the bugs it killed. Looking back, these foggers represent a time when convenience outweighed caution, and chemicals were introduced into homes with little understanding of their long-term impact. Today, DDT stands as a symbol of environmental and health awareness born from painful discovery. In some schools, gender segregation extended beyond clubs and into the classroom itself. Boys and girls were often separated for lessons that reinforced stereotypical skills: home economics for girls, shop class for boys. Teachers defended it as preparation for real life. Girls learned cooking, sewing, and childcare while boys worked with wood, metal, or engines. It was an unspoken law of education, shaping future roles long before students even had a say. Many girls secretly envied the power tools, while some boys wished for the creativity of cooking. But crossing that boundary was discouraged or mocked. One boy who tried to enroll in home economics was told flatly, "That class isn't for you." A girl who asked for shop was laughed at until she dropped the request. The system pretended to prepare kids for life, but what it really did was decide it for them. These divisions quietly told students that their future was already decided, that curiosity had limits based on gender. By the end of the decade, integration began slowly, but the damage lingered. The classroom had already taught its lesson: equality was optional. Shrinky Dinks were marketed as a harmless art project, a way for kids to draw, color, and then watch their creations magically shrink into hard plastic charms. What no one mentioned at first was that the original versions came with serious hazards. Early Shrinky Dinks required baking in standard home ovens, and as they heated, they released fumes from the plastic sheets that were far from healthy. Kids often pressed their faces close to the oven door, noses nearly touching the glass, to watch their designs twist and curl like magic. The transformation was hypnotic, bright markers darkening, edges curling, and colors deepening into perfect little trinkets. For a few glorious minutes, the entire kitchen smelled like excitement and chemical vapor, and no one thought twice about it. The smell was sharp and unmistakable, filling kitchens with a chemical tang that left many parents concerned. Kids huddled around the oven door to watch the transformation, unaware that they were breathing in harmful gases. While no major disasters were widely reported, growing concern about fumes and burns forced manufacturers to redesign the product with safer materials and methods. Despite the risk, Shrinky Dinks became an icon of 1980s crafting, a mix of creativity, danger, and instant gratification. The thrill of watching your artwork warp, curl, and harden into something permanent was unforgettable, even if it came with a dose of toxic nostalgia. Formaldehyde-treated artificial garlands were draped across mantels, staircases, and doorways in nearly every 1980s home, their lush green appearance lasting season after season without wilting. Families loved how realistic they looked compared to older plastic versions, and the convenience of never replacing them made the investment worthwhile. Parents wrapped them around banisters while children helped secure them with ribbons, everyone breathing in that faint chemical smell nobody questioned. The garlands held their shape because manufacturers treated them with formaldehyde, a preservative that slowly released invisible fumes throughout the holiday season. Every time someone walked past or adjusted a draped section, more chemical escaped into living spaces where families gathered. Children sleeping near decorated doorways breathed the vapors all night without anyone realizing the exposure was happening. When researchers connected formaldehyde off-gassing to respiratory irritation and long-term concerns, regulations forced manufacturers to find safer methods. The garlands that once seemed like smart investments became reminders of how convenience can mask invisible dangers. Leaving real food out for Santa overnight seems like the most innocent Christmas ritual of all, and in private homes it still is. But in the 1970s, this tradition extended far beyond living rooms. Schools, community centers, stores, and even public lobbies would set out plates of cookies, pieces of fruit, slices of cake, or whole cups of warm milk for Santa, letting every child who walked by feel like they were part of the magic. Nobody questioned hygiene. Nobody wondered how long the food had been sitting out or whether it was safe. It was simply a gesture of charm and belief, one that made the holiday season feel alive in every corner of town. Today, however, public health codes strictly forbid leaving perishable foods out in public spaces. Food safety laws treat these little displays as contamination risks. Even cookies, if unsealed, can violate regulations about pests and sanitation. The world became more careful, cleaner, and much more anxious. Maybe that is understandable, but something tender was lost along the way. When you think back on those public Santa plates, overflowing with half-eaten treats and crumbs left by passing children, you can almost feel the warmth of a community that believed in magic together. Asbestos oven mitts and hot pads were marketed as indestructible. Advertisements promised they could handle any heat without ever catching fire. Housewives trusted them, pulling casseroles and roasts straight from the oven with confidence. It was the post-war era of atomic age optimism, when scientific materials meant progress and danger felt impossible. The word asbestos was said with pride. It sounded technical, modern, and safe. Nobody imagined that the same mineral used in insulation and factories could turn a kitchen into a slow-motion health hazard. The secret was asbestos, a mineral that could resist flames but released deadly fibers every time it was touched. Each squeeze, each fold, released invisible dust into the air. Over time, those fibers lodged deep in the lungs, leading to mesothelioma and other fatal illnesses decades later. The danger was silent and patient, hiding behind the promise of safety. By the time the truth came out, many who used them daily were already sick. Asbestos was once hailed as the perfect material for modern living. It ended up becoming one of history's most infamous killers. Those oven mitts, sold with warmth and trust, literally took people's breath away. In 2009, Nestlé Toll House cookie dough, something nearly every American household trusted, became the center of a national panic. For decades, people could not resist sneaking a spoonful straight from the mixing bowl. It was childhood rebellion in its sweetest form, a taste of doughy, buttery comfort. But that year, hospitals began linking a mysterious wave of E. coli infections to unbaked Toll House dough. Investigators traced the bacteria to contaminated flour and eggs, something no one ever thought twice about. The news spread fast, and families across the country threw away tubs of dough from their refrigerators. It was a moment of disbelief. How could something so innocent, so normal, become dangerous? The recall changed food laws forever. New reformulation rules required pasteurization and clear warnings against eating raw dough, ending an era of guilty pleasure. Nestlé later reintroduced a safer version, but it never quite felt the same. People began to bake their cookies all the way through, no longer daring to take that secret taste. Still, the memory of licking the spoon while baking with family lingers for millions, a reminder that nostalgia often hides in the smallest, simplest moments. And sometimes those moments vanish overnight, not because we outgrow them, but because safety finally caught up to sweetness. School clubs and extracurricular activities in the 1970s reflected the strict gender expectations of the time. Boys could not join cheerleading, dance, or home economics, and girls were banned from football, mechanics, or debate clubs in some districts. Guidance counselors openly discouraged students from crossing those lines, warning it would bring the wrong kind of attention. For many schools, gender roles were treated as tradition, not discrimination. The boy who wanted to sew was mocked. The girl who wanted to weld was told no. Even as the women's rights movement grew nationwide, schools lagged behind, teaching conformity instead of equality. Some students challenged the system anyway, quietly showing up at the wrong club meetings just to prove they could. They were often laughed at or sent home, but their courage started to chip away at the old expectations. Those small acts of rebellion became the cracks that would eventually break open the walls of gendered education. The rules were often unwritten but deeply enforced by both teachers and peers. Only toward the late 1970s did some districts start allowing mixed activities, but by then, countless students had already been pushed into boxes they never fit in. These outdated club restrictions might seem small, but they taught something far larger: who society thought you were allowed to be. The skip-it was supposed to be harmless fun, a simple plastic ring around your ankle connected to a ball that spun as you jumped. The goal was to skip over it without tripping, counting rotations with each pass. It was the kind of toy that looked safe until it was not. Every playground had that one kid who took it too far, turning the skip-it into a competitive sport. The plastic ball would smack the pavement like a drum, echoing across recess while lines of kids waited for their turn. It was all fun until someone missed a jump, tripped, and landed hard, usually to the sound of laughter before the nurse was called. The hard plastic ball could easily clip ankles, shins, or even teeth if things went wrong. Many kids learned the pain of getting tangled mid-swing, tumbling onto the pavement in tears. Despite the bruises, it became a playground favorite, with competitions to see who could skip it the longest. Teachers grew tired of the chaos, and some schools banned it outright. Still, its catchy jingle and simple design made it unforgettable. The skip-it may have been dangerous, but it was also pure 1980s energy, loud, competitive, and just a little bit reckless. PVC blow-mold yard figures with toxic plasticizers stood proudly on lawns throughout the 1980s, their cheerful Santas and snowmen glowing from internal bulbs that made neighborhoods feel magical after dark. Families collected them over years, adding new figures each season until entire yards became illuminated winter wonderlands. Children loved running between them, touching their smooth plastic surfaces and peering inside at the warm orange glow of incandescent bulbs. These figures were made from polyvinyl chloride softened with plasticizers that made the material flexible enough to mold into complex shapes. Under summer storage heat and winter bulb warmth, those plasticizers slowly migrated to the surface and released fumes that drifted across yards where families gathered. The chemicals responsible for making the plastic pliable were later linked to hormone disruption, especially troubling for children who spent hours playing near the glowing figures. When regulations tightened around these compounds, manufacturers scrambled to reformulate. The beloved yard decorations that defined neighborhood holiday spirit became symbols of an era that prioritized appearance over safety. Selling homemade holiday baked goods without permits was a simple way to share joy and earn a little cash in the 1970s. Families made fudge, fruitcake, cookies, and sweetbreads in their home kitchens, wrapping them in foil or wax paper and selling them to neighbors, teachers, or church members. No one asked for licenses or health inspections. People trusted the hands that baked the food, not the paperwork behind it. There was pride in every recipe, many passed down through generations and guarded like treasure. And buyers felt like they were supporting friends, not just buying dessert. People trusted each other. The taste of a neighbor's homemade treat felt like a connection, not a risk. Today, though, food handling laws make this illegal without proper certification. Kitchens must be inspected, ingredients documented, and packaging regulated. Something warm and human was lost in that shift, but the memory of receiving those imperfect, lovingly made treats still brings comfort every holiday season. Raw milk was once the pride of the American farm, bottled straight from the source and sold in glass jars. People swore it tasted better, richer, creamier, and somehow more real. In the 1950s, it was still common to see it on grocery shelves, untouched by modern processing. But beneath the nostalgia was danger. Without pasteurization, raw milk carried bacteria that caused tuberculosis, salmonella, and other deadly diseases. Rural families, especially in dairy states, considered pasteurization unnecessary city talk. They trusted their cows, their neighbors, and the land itself. Unfortunately, nature is not as kind as nostalgia remembers. It hides danger even in the things we love most. Families believed they were drinking nature's perfect food, not knowing that it sometimes carried the very thing that made them sick. Eventually, stricter food laws swept across the country, forcing dairies to heat-treat every drop before it hit the store. Raw milk became illegal in most states, a symbol of both freedom lost and safety gained. To some, it was government overreach. To others, it was salvation. Either way, the days of milk straight from the cow were gone for good. Sometimes even the most ordinary snacks carry hidden danger. In 2018, Ritz Bits sandwich crackers with peanut butter were pulled from shelves after a massive recall. The culprit was undeclared whey powder contaminated with salmonella. Parents gasped, wondering how something so small could cause so much fear. For decades, Ritz had been a symbol of comfort, safe, predictable, and always there. The news felt like a betrayal, a reminder that even trusted names could crack under pressure. It was a shocking discovery because Ritz was a household name trusted for generations. Parents who packed those mini sandwiches into lunchboxes never thought twice about them. But suddenly, something so innocent became unsafe. The recall stretched across all 50 states, and boxes were destroyed by the truckload. For weeks, grocery stores had empty shelves where Ritz once stood. Though the company reformulated and returned the product, the incident left a lasting mark. It was a reminder that even comfort food can be fragile, that behind every familiar logo are real risks and real people trying to make it right again. High-voltage tube televisions without shielding were once the centerpiece of American living rooms, flickering with static and delivering the evening news in a warm glow that families gathered around. These sets were heavy, bulky, and full of complicated electronics that few people understood, but they brought entertainment into the home in a way nothing else could. Behind the scenes, though, those early televisions ran on dangerously high-voltage circuits that were not yet shielded the way modern electronics are. If a tube cracked or overheated, it could release radiation or send an electric shock through the casing. In some cases, internal components exploded, sending shards of glass inside the machine and sometimes outward toward anyone standing too close. Over time, safety standards improved and regulators required shielding that protected families from these hidden hazards. For many households, it is chilling to think that a beloved family television once carried risks nobody truly understood. Those sets tell a story of excitement, innovation, and the dangers that can hide inside even the most ordinary household items. In the 1970s, teenage pregnancy was not seen as a challenge to support. It was a problem to remove. Pregnant students were often forced out of school, told they would set a bad example. Some were sent to secret special schools, while others simply disappeared from classrooms one day. Administrators claimed it was to protect the school's reputation, not the student's future. Friends would whisper, teachers would avoid the subject, and an entire chapter of a young woman's life would be erased under the word shame. These girls were denied the right to graduate alongside their classmates or to continue their studies at all. The idea that motherhood and education could coexist was unthinkable to many at the time. It was a cold reflection of how society valued appearances more than compassion. Looking back, this rule did more than hide pregnancies. It hid humanity. The easy-bake oven of the 1980s felt like pure independence in a box. With a tiny light bulb acting as the heat source, kids could bake small cakes and cookies all by themselves. It was marketed as a way to feel grown up, and it worked, maybe too well. Many kids used the oven to experiment, tossing in candy bars, crayons, or whatever was in the pantry, just to see what would happen. The smell that filled the room was equal parts sugar and smoke, and parents would come running only to find melted chaos inside. Some kids even charged friends a few cents to taste test their creations, proudly serving up burned chocolate and half-cooked dough. The problem was those little ovens could get dangerously hot. Thousands of children burned their fingers or hands trying to pull out the metal pans, and some even ended up with serious blisters. There were no automatic shutoffs, and the compact design trapped heat in ways no one expected. Parents quickly realized the toy was more hazard than hobby. Later versions introduced safety doors and cooler heating elements, but by then, the damage to its reputation was done. The 1980s model still holds a nostalgic place in many hearts, but it also taught an entire generation a hard lesson. Sometimes being just like mom comes with a price. Nitrocellulose-coated paper chains hung in loops across 1980s living rooms, their shiny surfaces catching light and adding festive color to every corner. Children spent hours at kitchen tables cutting strips, gluing links together, and coating them with lacquer sprays that made the paper gleam like something from a department store display. The craft was a beloved holiday tradition, teaching patience and creativity while producing decorations the whole family could admire. What nobody realized was that nitrocellulose, the compound making that glossy finish possible, was essentially the same material used in early film stock notorious for fires. The coated chains hung near fireplaces, candles, and hot light bulbs, inches away from ignition sources that could transform innocent decorations into fast-spreading flames. Families strung them across rooms without understanding how quickly fire could race along those shiny links. When fire safety experts documented the risks of nitrocellulose in home crafts, the sprays were reformulated or discontinued. The cheerful paper chains that represented family togetherness became cautionary examples of flammable beauty. Leaving kids alone at the mall during holiday shopping was one of those quiet freedoms parents had in the 1970s. They would drop you off with a handful of coins, a vague reminder to meet at the front doors by dinner, and trust that you would handle the rest. The mall was your world for the day, filled with music, toy displays, escalators that felt like rides, and the sweet smell of pretzels drifting through every hallway. You could roam from store to store with your friends, sit in the food court watching the holiday crowds, and feel grown up in a way few places could offer. Today, though, leaving a child alone like that is considered neglect. Authorities step in quickly, malls enforce strict policies, and parents face judgment from every direction. Something about that shift feels bigger than just safety. It speaks to how differently we view independence now. But for the kids who lived it, the mall was a kingdom, and those long afternoons exploring its bright corridors still glow in memory. In the 1950s, DDT was a household name for all the wrong reasons. Farmers, grocers, and even homemakers believed it was a miracle, a chemical that could protect crops from pests and keep fruits looking fresh for weeks. Produce was sprayed, dusted, and even rinsed in it before hitting grocery shelves. Apples gleamed brighter, tomatoes stayed red longer, and no one questioned it. You could not see the danger, and that made it easy to ignore. Decades later, scientists discovered that DDT was more than just a pesticide. It was a poison that lingered in soil, water, and even human tissue. It killed insects, yes, but it also harmed birds, fish, and people. The chemical built up in the environment until its effects could not be denied. The once fresh produce of the 1950s became a warning from history. What we cannot see can still hurt us. When DDT was banned, it marked a turning point in how America thought about safety, trust, and the true cost of convenience. Then there were Olestra chips, the so-called miracle snack of the 90s. They promised all the flavor of regular potato chips with none of the fat. For families trying to eat healthier, that was a dream come true. Bags of these chips filled grocery aisles with big labels that said fat-free and guilt-free. But the dream turned sour fast. People discovered that Olestra did not just remove fat, it also removed dignity. It blocked the body from absorbing essential vitamins and caused severe digestive distress. The stories spread fast, and suddenly the chips became the punchline of every late-night talk show. What started as a scientific breakthrough ended as a national embarrassment. Within a few years, Olestra was quietly pulled from shelves, never to return. It left behind a strange lesson about how far we are willing to go to keep the foods we love while pretending to make them better for us. Some things, it seems, were meant to stay full of fat and full of flavor. Dichlorvos pest strips, also called no-pest strips, hung in kitchens, bedrooms, basements, and even nurseries, sold as a hands-free way to keep insects away without sprays or traps. People loved how easy they were. Just hang a strip, forget about it, and let it silently do its work for weeks at a time. Grandparents trusted these bright yellow strips like invisible shields, believing they made their homes cleaner and safer. But that same vapor did not stop at insects. It drifted through the air into every breath people took, carrying a chemical that affected the nervous system. Children, pets, and older adults absorbed it the most, often without any symptoms until the damage had already begun. Once regulators understood how dangerous constant exposure was, especially in enclosed rooms, they banned the strips from household use. Looking back, it feels unsettling to realize how easily something labeled as safe could have such hidden consequences. PCB-containing light-set transformers hummed quietly beneath Christmas trees in the 1980s, powering elaborate blinking patterns that made decorations feel alive and magical. Families plugged in multiple light strings, relying on small transformer boxes to regulate electricity and create the twinkling sequences everyone loved. The boxes sat on carpets, tucked behind tree stands, sometimes buried under presents where children crawled and played. Inside those unassuming plastic cases was oil containing polychlorinated biphenyls, industrial coolants that prevented overheating during long hours of operation. When transformers aged, cracked, or overheated, the PCB oil could leak onto floors, carpets, and hands of anyone who touched them. Families cleaned up mysterious oily residue without realizing they were spreading contamination that would linger for years. Studies eventually linked PCB exposure to cancer and neurological damage, prompting regulators to ban the compounds from consumer products. The little boxes that powered holiday magic became toxic relics requiring careful disposal. The twinkling lights they powered came with costs nobody understood until decades later. It might sound strange now, but the original Kinder Surprise egg from Europe was once one of the most exciting treasures a child could find on a store shelf. Imagine peeling back the shiny foil, breaking open that sweet chocolate shell, and discovering a tiny toy inside, something to build or collect. It was more than candy. It was an experience that made every trip to the grocery store feel like an adventure. But the United States government saw something else inside those eggs: danger. The small toys were hidden completely within the chocolate, making them a choking hazard, especially for children who bit too eagerly. The Food and Drug Administration stepped in, declaring that no food could contain non-nutritive items inside it. Parents protested, children cried, and the eggs vanished before most Americans ever got to try one. What survived were distant memories and imported stories about a forbidden treat, the kind you could only find overseas. Even today, The thought of biting into one feels a little rebellious, a little nostalgic, as if breaking the law never tasted so sweet. Lard-based frosting sold in tins were the unsung stars of post-war baking aisles. Housewives praised them as miracles, ready to spread, shelf-stable, and guaranteed to make cakes look beautiful for days. They were smooth, sweet, and rich with a comforting aroma. For families still recovering from the war, they symbolized abundance, an indulgence that could turn a plain cake into something special. Advertisers sold them with smiling mothers and birthday candles, proof that convenience was the new luxury. Few realized those glossy cakes were hiding spoonfuls of industrial fat processed beyond recognition. But beneath that charm was a mess of unregulated animal fats, processed with unknown chemicals to extend shelf life. Over time, these frostings were found to be dangerously high in cholesterol and trans fats, contributing to heart disease. The same product that crowned birthday cakes with joy was silently clogging arteries across the nation. Once nutritionists connected the dots, those tins vanished from grocery shelves almost overnight. Still, for those who grew up in the 1950s, that sweet, greasy taste brings back the smell of birthdays and bake sales. It was the flavor of a time when no one read ingredient lists and when indulgence came before information. Cadmium-plated dishware once sat proudly on dinner tables across the nation, decorated with bright reds, yellows, and oranges that made every meal feel a little more cheerful. Grandparents loved these plates because they were sturdy, vibrant, and sold everywhere from department stores to small local shops. Families used them daily for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, never imagining that something so colorful could carry such a serious threat. Back then, bright colors meant quality and charm, not danger, but cadmium does not stay locked inside ceramic glaze. Over time, especially when exposed to acids from food, the metal can leach out and seep directly into whatever is being eaten. Researchers eventually discovered that cadmium exposure could damage kidneys, weaken bones, and cause long-term health issues, even at low levels. This revelation shocked families who had relied on these plates for years. Regulators quickly moved to ban cadmium in dishware, forcing manufacturers to overhaul their production methods. Many people packed away their old sets, uncertain whether it was safe to keep them even as decorations. The contrast between the cheerful appearance and the hidden danger made these dishes one of the more unsettling household discoveries of the era today. They serve as a reminder that beauty and safety do not always go hand in hand, especially in a time when fewer regulations existed to protect everyday families. As if being weighed in front of peers was not enough, schools often posted physical fitness results for everyone to see. Gym teachers would tack up large charts on the wall, listing every student's name and their performance in push-ups, running, or flexibility tests. The fastest and strongest stood proudly at the top. Students would crowd around those charts, their eyes scanning for their names as if their entire worth hung on a single line of ink. Some pretended not to care, while others secretly compared themselves to friends, rivals, or even siblings in the same school. It was competition disguised as health education, and it shaped how kids saw their bodies for years to come. Everyone else fell into the lower ranks, names in plain sight. Teachers claimed it was motivation, but it was really shame in chart form. Students dreaded those announcements because there was no hiding from the numbers. If you struggled, everyone knew. If you excelled, you were expected to stay there forever. These lists divided kids as clearly as report cards, but with more embarrassment attached. What should have been about progress turned into a public scoreboard of failure. Many people who grew up then still recall the sinking feeling of seeing their name halfway down, or worse, at the bottom. The message was clear. Success was public, but so was shame. That kind of motivation did not build athletes. It built memories of humiliation that lasted long after graduation. Magnetic building sets were the kind of toy that made kids feel like engineers. With tiny magnets inside colorful rods and metal balls, you could build towers, bridges, and geometric shapes that defied gravity. The concept was brilliant, until those tiny magnets started falling out. When swallowed, multiple magnets could attract inside the intestines, pinching and tearing through tissue. Doctors called the injuries horrific, and emergency surgeries skyrocketed. Parents who once saw the sets as educational now viewed them as silent threats. Eventually, stricter safety standards forced toy companies to redesign magnetic parts completely, sealing them away from small hands. Even so, these sets remain infamous reminders that some of the most fascinating toys also carried hidden dangers. They captured the 1980s perfectly, creative, intelligent, and just a little too risky for comfort. Bare wire extension cords for outdoor displays snaked across 1980s lawns, powering elaborate light arrangements that transformed ordinary homes into neighborhood attractions. Families ran these cords under bushes, across walkways, and up trees, connecting dozens of light strands to single outlets pushed far beyond their intended capacity. The urgency to create the brightest display often meant using whatever cords were available, including older models with damaged insulation or exposed copper never designed for outdoor moisture. Rain, snow, and morning dew soaked into worn sections where bare wire waited to deliver shocks to anyone who touched them. Children playing in yards sometimes grabbed cords while running, pets chewed through casings left across grass, and adults adjusting displays received jolts ranging from startling to dangerous. House fires started when overloaded connections sparked against dry leaves or wooden siding. When electrical codes finally caught up with holiday enthusiasm, regulations required weatherproof ratings and ground fault protection. The festive displays that brought neighborhoods together also brought dangers nobody fully appreciated. Radithor Energy Water was the drink that literally glowed with danger. Sold as a miracle tonic, it contained radium. Yes, the same radioactive element used in luminous paint and nuclear experiments. In the early part of the 20th century, radioactive meant powerful, not deadly. Companies bottled the promise of vitality and sold it to anyone who wanted to feel younger, stronger, and more alive. By the 1950s, it still lingered on dusty pharmacy shelves and in small-town grocery stores, the last echo of a deadly fad. People swore it cured fatigue, aches, and even impotence. What it actually did was slowly destroy the bones and organs of those who drank it. The most infamous case was that of Eben Byers, a wealthy industrialist who consumed bottles daily until his jaw literally disintegrated. The scandal forced regulators to finally ban all radioactive health products, but Radithor's legend endured. It became the ghost story of the grocery aisle, a reminder of what happens when trust and ignorance collide. In an age obsessed with miracle cures, it stands as one of history's most chilling examples of how far people will go to feel better, even as it kills them from the inside out. There was once a time when you could buy supersized McDonald's items not just in restaurants, but frozen in grocery stores. Burgers, fries, and breakfast sandwiches packaged for the home promised that same fast food flavor anytime, anywhere. It was a symbol of convenience, of America's unstoppable appetite for more. The frozen line sold well at first, feeding late-night cravings and quick dinners. But soon, the tide began to turn. Documentaries and health advocates exposed the growing obesity crisis, linking it to portion sizes and processed foods. The phrase supersize became a public target, a warning instead of a badge of indulgence. Laws requiring calorie disclosures and nutritional transparency pushed McDonald's to retire the branding entirely. Shelves that once held those frozen giants went empty, replaced by smaller, healthier options. For many, it marked the end of an era, a time when fast food felt fun, not frightening. Yet there is something undeniably nostalgic about those oversized meals, wrapped in red and gold packaging that promised happiness in minutes. They were part of a bigger cultural story, one about convenience, excess, and the simple joy of biting into something you knew you should not. And maybe, deep down, that is why people still miss them, not for the taste, but for the freedom they once represented. Morning announcements in the 1970s sometimes sounded more like sermons than school updates. Many schools began the day with Christian prayers broadcast over the intercom. Teachers and students of other faiths, or none, were expected to bow their heads and participate. It was tradition, they said, a way to start the day right. A hush would fall over the classroom as the principal's voice echoed through the speaker, reading verses before the pledge. Some students faked reverence to avoid standing out, while others truly believed they were doing something good. For those who did not share the faith, the silence was heavy, a mix of isolation and quiet resentment. But for many, it was a quiet reminder that religion and public education were still deeply tangled. Children who hesitated were called out or told they lacked respect. It would take court cases and years of social change before those prayers were fully banned. The intercom that once echoed with blessings now hums with neutral silence. What some remember as unity, others remember as exclusion, and that contrast still lingers in how we define freedom today. Stretch Armstrong was a marvel of toy engineering, a rubbery superhero who could be pulled, twisted, and stretched to absurd lengths before snapping back into shape. Kids loved testing his limits, often racing to see who could stretch him the farthest without breaking him. The original was fairly sturdy, filled with a dense corn syrup-like gel that made him heavy but oddly satisfying to tug. Then came the knockoffs, cheap imitations that looked the same but were filled with mysterious goo that was anything but safe. Some of these versions would burst open after too much stretching, oozing out a foul-smelling liquid that burned skin and stained carpets. No one really knew what was inside, but it was enough to send panicked parents grabbing paper towels and calling poison control. Others simply fell apart after a few days, their rubber skins tearing or leaking through seams. Despite the mess and mystery, kids adored them for the sheer fun of destruction. There was something about seeing what was inside that was almost irresistible. By the time regulators caught up and many of these knockoffs were banned, the damage was already done, literally and figuratively. Stretch Armstrong may have been about flexibility, but his imitators proved that cutting corners can snap back harder than any stretch ever could. Benzene-dipped pine cone ornaments appeared on Christmas trees throughout the 1980s, their preserved natural beauty adding rustic charm to holiday decorating. Craft stores sold them by the bag, and families collected them from parks and backyards, dipping them in solutions that kept them looking fresh and sometimes adding pleasant scents. The benzene-based solvents used in commercial preservation penetrated deep into the cone scales, preventing decay and giving them that slightly glossy appearance. Parents helped children tie ribbons around the stems, handling the treated cones repeatedly without gloves or thought of chemical exposure. The ornaments hung on trees near warm lights, releasing vapors that accumulated in closed rooms throughout the season. Some families noticed headaches or dizziness during decorating sessions, but blamed stuffy rooms rather than the cones. When researchers identified benzene as a known carcinogen linked to blood cancers, the preservation methods were abandoned. The natural ornaments that connected families to outdoor beauty became symbols of how toxic chemicals infiltrated even simple traditions. Cereal boxes with actual toys inside were the ultimate treasure hunt for kids. Every morning, siblings fought over who got to dig through the cereal first, hands plunging deep into the box for a plastic ring or tiny car. The toys were part of childhood, as iconic as the cereals themselves. For companies, it was genius marketing. Sell sugar and joy in the same package. Parents saw harmless fun, and kids saw magic. But buried in all that excitement was a small, overlooked danger. Toys small enough to swallow, hidden in the very food they ate. But behind the fun was a danger no one saw coming. Some of the small prizes caused choking incidents, and regulators finally cracked down. What began as clever marketing turned into a public safety issue. The toys disappeared, replaced with paper coupons or codes printed inside the box. Breakfast lost a bit of its magic, replaced by the dull reality of safety regulations. For parents, it was relief. For kids, it was heartbreak. Those little toys might have been risky, but they also represented the wonder of growing up in a world that felt just a little more free. Sizzlin' was supposed to be the future of breakfast, Marketed in the 1970s as better than bacon, it promised the same smoky flavor with less fat and cholesterol. Commercials showed smiling families flipping perfect strips on the stove, proud to be eating healthier. But sizzlin' was not exactly what it claimed. It was a mix of pork and beef blended with artificial flavorings and fillers that barely qualified as real meat. Over time, new labeling laws and stricter regulations revealed that its marketing had been misleading. The product was pulled and sizzlin' quietly faded away. For those who remember it, the name still carries a strange nostalgia, half comfort, half caution. It was a glimpse into an era when we trusted packaging more than ingredients and believed that science could reinvent even bacon. Some memories sizzle out, others linger just long enough to remind us how good intentions can sometimes turn synthetic. PCP, treated leather goods were once sold everywhere, from department stores to small clothing shops, offering belts, handbags, and jackets preserved with pentachlorophenol. Grandparents purchased them because they were durable, resistant to mold, and had a polished finish that made them look high quality. Back then, leather was expected to last for years, and PCP treatments were marketed as the perfect way to ensure longevity. Families rarely questioned what kept their belts from cracking or their purses from collecting mildew. But pentachlorophenol is a toxic chemical that seeps into skin on contact and releases fumes slowly over time. Researchers found that even casual handling caused exposure to a substance linked to liver damage, immune system issues, and long-term health effects. Children especially absorbed the chemical quickly when they touched bags or jackets treated with it. Once these dangers became public, regulators banned PCP for consumer products, forcing companies to switch to safer preservation methods. Families who owned older leather goods often had no idea they had been carrying or wearing something harmful for years. The contrast between a stylish accessory and the chemical hiding inside it made PCP-treated leather one of the more surprising household hazards of its time. Today, these items remind us that fashion can sometimes carry invisible risks that no one suspects until the science catches up. Patriotism was mandatory in the 1970s classroom. Every morning began with the Pledge of Allegiance, and refusing to stand was seen as an act of defiance. Students who stayed seated or silent could face detention, suspension, or even expulsion. It was less about love of country and more about enforcing obedience. Some kids quietly mouthed the words to avoid punishment, while others looked down at their desks, hearts pounding in defiance they could not voice. A few brave ones refused entirely, sparking whispers, outrage, or even calls to their parents. Those moments turned a daily routine into a test of loyalty no child should have had to face. Teachers were expected to report disrespectful students, and principals treated it like insubordination. Few questioned whether forcing loyalty was loyalty at all. Many children recited the words automatically, their voices blending into a rhythm they never truly thought about. Decades later, the idea of punishing someone for silent protest feels completely un-American, yet that was the daily reality. The 1970s may have looked free and expressive on the surface, but inside the classroom, conformity was law. The Battlestar Galactica missile-firing action figures were supposed to be every young sci-fi fan's dream come true. The toy line mirrored the excitement of the television show, with detailed spaceships and figures that could actually shoot small plastic missiles. Kids loved the realism, until that realism turned deadly. The missiles were small enough to fit into a child's mouth, and tragically, one boy choked to death after accidentally inhaling a projectile. That single event led to a massive recall and a permanent change in toy safety design. From that moment on, most manufacturers removed missile-launching features or made projectiles too large to swallow. At the time, though, parents were outraged that something marketed as safe had taken such a dark turn. The figures themselves became infamous collector's items, frozen in history as a symbol of the industry's recklessness. What started as a celebration of science fiction imagination ended with a harsh reality check about just how dangerous realistic play could become. Mercury-tipped thermometers for cooking were once the gold standard of precision. Every 1950s kitchen had one, The sleek silver line inside was mesmerizing. It measured everything from candy to roast temperatures, ensuring no recipe failed. Parents marveled at the metallic shine, and kids watched the silver bead race up the tube as if it were alive. No one realized that inside that innocent glimmer was one of the most poisonous substances known to man. In homes across America, small spills turned into invisible clouds of vapor that lingered for hours, even days. But few knew that inside that little glass tube was one of the most toxic substances on Earth. Mercury, if released, could evaporate and poison the air, damaging nerves and organs. Accidents happened more often than you might think. One slip, one crack, and the shiny silver would roll across the counter like liquid metal, fascinating but deadly. Children played with it, adults brushed it off, and homes unknowingly filled with toxic vapor. Eventually, scientists proved what had long been suspected. Even tiny amounts could cause serious harm. The thermometer was replaced by safer tools, but its legacy lingered in the memories of those who grew up watching that silver line dance up and down with the heat. Chloroform-based snow globe fluid swirled inside countless decorative globes that sat on mantels and shelves in 1980s homes, their miniature winter scenes captivating children who shook them endlessly. The tiny snowflakes drifted with perfect slowness because the liquid inside was denser than water, creating that dreamy effect everyone associated with holiday magic. Kids pressed their faces close to the glass, watching the flakes settle around tiny Santas, snowmen, and village scenes, while parents smiled at their wonder. What nobody knew was that some manufacturers used chloroform-based mixtures to achieve that ideal snow-falling effect, chemicals that could cause serious harm if globes cracked or shattered. Children who dropped globes and helped clean up the spilled liquid absorbed the compound through skin, while vapors entered lungs before anyone realized cleanup required more than paper towels. When product safety testing revealed the toxic contents, manufacturers switched to safer glycol-based fluids. The enchanting globes that once symbolized peaceful winter scenes became reminders that beauty sometimes floats in dangerous solutions. If any of these forbidden 80s moments stirred a memory, drop your story in the comments, tap like to keep the nostalgia alive, and subscribe so you never miss another journey into the past we thought we knew.